Lagos as the Deputy Head of Mission and Head of Economic Section at the German Embassy at Hanoi from 2019 to 2022, and the Deputy Head of Mission and Head of Economic Section at the German Embassy at Seoul from 2016 to 2019, and also has the Head of Division for German Personnel in International Organizations Foreign Office at Berlin from 2013 to 2016, and as the Deputy Head of Division for Climate and Environmental Foreign Policy, Foreign Office, Berlin, from 2011 to 2013. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let's please receive him with a warm round of applause as he comes up for the welcome address. Thank you.
Good morning to everybody. Honorable Federal Minister Mohammed Idris, I know he is not available, but he will be represented soon. Dear Dr. Richard Ikebe, Chairman of the Board of BusinessDay Media. Dear Frank Aigbogun, Founder and CEO of BusinessDay Media Limited. Thanks a lot to you, Frank, that we are together here this morning. It was really a good idea to send your collaborator, Ime Inang, to my office and get me integrated in this initiative. Thank you very much. Dear Aisha Ibrahim, I know she's not here, but represented, President of the National Association of Women Journalists. I know there are two fronts, the front fighting for media freedom and the front fighting for gender equality. So I can only admire this work. Esteemed professionals representing the Fourth Estate, dear legal colleagues, dear diplomatic colleagues, distinguished partners and participants. A political demonstration with thousands of participants is moving through a city. A couple of journalists and camera teams are accompanying the move. Suddenly, from the midst of the crowd, a few sportive men jump out and attack the media representatives. Police is nearby, but cannot be fast enough. A female journalist and a male camera staff have to be treated in hospital. 2 TV cameras are destroyed. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm misleading you. This is not Nigeria, this is Germany 2024. So, my first message is, you are not alone. The working environment of the Fourth Estate, it's actually the same expression in German, vierte Gewalt, Fourth Estate, of independent media and all their staff deserves more attention in both our countries and beyond. Therefore, our gathering today is not just timely, but really important in highlighting the current challenges for the Fourth Estate in Nigeria. We jointly have to find ways and means how to protect the freedom of the press, the freedom of independent media better. My second message is we have to be aware of what is at stake. Nigeria has been a populist democracy without interruption since 1999, since 25 years. The level of media freedom compared on a global political scale has been relatively high since then. My wife and I know what we are talking about. Our previous posting was Hanoi, Vietnam. There are no free independent media in Vietnam. There is no freedom of expression in this country. And when you are together in a restaurant with 4 Vietnamese people, you will not get any open opinion of one of the 4. When you sit in Lagos in a restaurant with 4 Nigerians, I promise you, you get at least 5 or 6 clear opinions. So we have to be aware of these differences on the global scale. And in any case, we shouldn't take media freedom for granted. Free, unharassed media are not just a precondition for a democratic society in general. They are essential for any meaningful level of accountability and transparency. And this does not only refer to the political system, but to the economy, to the health sector, to the social system, actually to many key aspects of people's day-to-day lives. I meet so many Nigerians who tell me, this is corrupt, and here's corruption. Public funds are mismanaged. There are palliatives, but no transparency. Who shall report about all of this? Who can inform the citizens in a reliable way? Who can build up public pressure to fight, for example, corruption? If not, free and independent media recognized and protected by the state. Ladies and gentlemen, as a foreign diplomat based in Lagos, on the one hand, I can only appreciate the existing level of press freedom in Nigeria. I receive 3 independent newspapers every morning. It's not a secret, one of them is the BusinessDay, but I promise you I'm not being paid for this. The consulate is paying the subscription. There are courageous domestic TV stations, especially my wife is really a fan of both Rise TV, Channels TV, to be better informed, and there are other TV channels with enlightening programs and great personnel. But, on the other hand, there is bad news as well. According to the 2024 World Press Freedom Index, compiled by Reporters Without Borders, Nigeria ranks 112 out of 180 countries. While this rank does not sound that bad, maybe, the index report clearly states that being a journalist in Nigeria is a risky job. Nigerian journalists are regularly monitored, attacked, and arbitrarily arrested. Even I, as a foreign observer, know of several bad cases, especially during the 2023 election campaign and around the national protests recently in August 2024. A quote from the most recent index report reads as follows: "The level of governmental interference in the news media is significant. It can involve pressure, harassment of journalists and media outlets, and even censorship." So I can only urge all of you to jointly find ways to improve this situation. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, allow me to refer to an international body existing since 2019, the so-called Media Freedom Coalition, MFC. Since January 2024, Germany has been co-chairing this multilateral network. Currently, it consists of 51 member states, including a couple of African states, such as Ghana, for example, the UNESCO as UN agency, 22 consulting NGOs, and a legal expert panel. One of the instruments of the coalition is a so-called Global Media Defense Fund, trying to care not just for critical country situations, but also for individual journalists who are in real danger for wrong reasons. If you are interested, please have a closer look at the work of the Media Freedom Coalition. Dear Frank, dear Ime Enang, dear Business Day team, thanks a lot for your trust and the excellent cooperation for getting this event together. And thanks all of you for being here, for joining us. I wish all of us an inspiring morning. And to all media representatives in the room, keep an open mindset, stay courageous. Let us all work together to create a safe and free working environment for independent journalism in Nigeria and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for that amazing keynote address. We will now be taking a goodwill message from Mrs. Aisha Ibrahim. She is the president of the National Association of Women Journalists, and she'll be giving us a goodwill message. But before she comes up, Mrs. Aisha Ibrahim is a devoted civil servant and journalist with a bachelor's degree in mass communication and over 3 decades of experience. Professional background, she has served in various public sector roles, including information attaché positions in ministries such as the Women's Affairs and Social Development Budget and Planning at the State Universal Primary Education Board and the State Ministry of Housing and Energy and the Ministry of Health and Health Management Board. She also served as press secretary to the former governor's wife and held roles at the Borno State Liaison Office in Kaduna and later Abuja. As a member of several non-governmental organizations, Aisha actively engages in advocacy on societal and humanitarian issues, particularly focusing on persons of concern, including orphans and vulnerable children, victims of sexual and gender-based violence, and polio eradication awareness campaigns. And she also has amazing educational background. Our educational journey includes attending Vladimir Primary School in Blue and the American International School of Islamabad, Pakistan, and the Armitage High School in Gambia, St. Augustine's High School in the Gambia, and the University of Maiduguri. And she obtained a bachelor degree in mass communication in 1989, and she's represented today by Mrs. Diola Ekine, the Lagos State Chapter Chairman. Please make her feel welcome as she comes up for the goodwill message. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Please permit me to maintain the already established protocol. I will be delivering the goodwill message on behalf of the National President of Nigeria Association of Women Journalists, Ajia Aisha Ibrahim. This dialogue with the theme, Empowering Nigerian Fourth Estate, Legal Framework and Issues of Media Resilience and Sustainability, is not only timely but crucial to the ongoing efforts to strengthen the media roles in public opinion, promoting accountability and advancing justice. As journalists, our work extends beyond mere information dissemination. It involves educating, enlightening, and empowering citizens to actively participate in democratic processes. However, to fulfill this role effectively, we must address the challenges threatening media resilience and sustainability in our nation. Today, we gather to discuss how legal framework can enhance the media ability to withstand these challenges and sustain its mission. A supportive legal framework rooted in protection of press freedom and the rights of journalists is essential for media resilience. Without clear policies that safeguards media practitioners and institutions, our work remains vulnerable to undue pressure, harassment, and economic instability. A resilient media is not only essential for democracy, but also for nation building. The resilience in the Nigerian media, especially in times of political, economic, and social unrest, has proven indispensable. However, resilience cannot solely depend on the tenacity of individual journalists or media houses. It must be fortified by institutional support, policy backing, and respect for journalistic freedom and independence. At NAWAJ, we are invested in ensuring that women in journalism have equal opportunities to thrive within a resistant media environment. Gender equality within the profession strengthens the media as a whole, bringing diverse perspectives to the fore. Addressing the unique challenges faced by female journalists, both legal and cultural, is integral and achieving a more robust and sustainable fourth estate. The economic stability of media organizations is equally crucial, with shrinking revenue streams, especially in print journalism. There is an urgent need for innovation and adaptation to ensure the financial viability of the sector. We must explore new models of media financing such as digital monetization and partnerships, while advocating for policies that encourages investment in media industry. This policy dialogue also provides an opportunity to address the critical issues of media harassment. Journalists are increasingly at risk due to pressures and dangers associated with investigative reporting. We must call on our lawmakers and policymakers to enact and enforce laws that protect journalists, guaranteeing them the freedom to perform their duties without fear of intimidation or harm. Furthermore, we need stronger mechanisms to combat misinformation and disinformation, which have become significant challenges in the digital age. It is vital to establish a legal framework that not only curbs the spread of false information, but also protects the right of journalists to report freely and accurately without undue censorship. As we deliberate today, let us remember that a thriving and resilient media is the backbone of our democracy. It empowers citizens, promotes transparency, and drives accountability. I encourage all stakeholders to actively engage in today's discussion, contributing ideas that will propel us towards a more sustainable and empowered media landscape in Nigeria. On behalf of the Nigeria Association of Women Journalists, I thank all the organizers and participants at this commitment and strengthening our media industry. Let us work together to build a resilient fourth estate and continue to serve as watchdogs of the society, a champion of truth, a pillar of democratic governance. Thank you all. I look forward to a fruitful deliberation.
Thank you very much once again. We will now be taking our keynote speech. We still have the representative of the Honorable Minister on their way, so we'll be taking our keynote speech very quickly. And our keynote speech today will be given to us by Dr. Richard Ikebe, is the chairman of the board of BusinessDay, and he will be giving us our keynote speech for today. But I will just quickly say a few things about him. Dr. Richard Ikebe trained at the Nigerian Institute of Journalism and worked at the Daily Times and Newswatch before serving as media and communication policy advisor under 2 military administrations, and is the chairman of the board of BusinessDay and is an adjunct senior fellow at the Pan-Atlantic University. So please put your hands together as it comes up for the keynote speech. Thank you so much.
Good morning. How are you guys doing? Give me 1 second, will you? I am one of those people that is called a digital alien. It's here. That's good. I want to, Your Excellency, thank you for joining us and for being part of this. And I want to congratulate our publisher, Frank Aigbogun. There's a Chinese proverb which says that if a man works hard, the land will not be lazy. Just think about that. I think Frank is an epitome of working hard to the point that his land is not lazy. Anybody who is involved in the media industry in Nigeria knows how hard it is to sustain a media formation and how quickly they die. So to have been around for this long, we congratulate you. And I want to acknowledge and welcome my sister, the chair of the BusinessDay Foundation, Mrs. Makinwa. Thank you very much for being with us. Mrs. Makinwa is an international diplomat based in the United States, but she juggles so many balls, and she's very, very instrumental to how far the BusinessDay Foundation has moved as quickly as it has. Thank you very much, ma. I also want to acknowledge those who have been acknowledged earlier. The representative of the minister who just came in. I've taken your position, so I'm going to add your time to mine. Welcome. This morning, I have been asked to speak on the landscape, the media landscape. I think arguably, probably have been in the media. Oh, yeah, my friend Ogiaboigbe is here. I'm probably the oldest media person. Oh, Ted is here. Ted and I were in the Daily Times in the 70s. So you can begin to want to guess. And Ogiaboigbe and I were in school together. So you can begin to want to guess how far. We were young, though. We came in very early. The problem before us is it has always been there. It's always been there. I was reading something yesterday, and it really intrigued me. I'm going to read it out to you because it's going to cause you to think a little. It says, our problem is not that we are confronted with difficulties, but that we are surrounded by difficulties that we do not understand. And we cannot cope with them because we do not know what they are. Because no one has been able to define them with a comprehensive clarity needed to convince us that is right. Media is neither a fish nor a bird. That is why it has been difficult for us to understand it. Is media a business? Is it a vocation? What is it? If we say it's a business, then we talk about sustainability. If we say it's a vocation, then it doesn't really matter how long it lasts, long as it has fulfilled its objective and why it was set up. Asking me to talk about an overview of media over the years and into the present day is an area that I'm very, very interested in. When I was full-time with the School of Media, before I dethroned myself and became an adjunct, I realized that we didn't have materials, local materials with which to teach media. And journalists like Frank, like Ted here, and Ogie wrote, but we're still waiting for Frank to write his, and Ted to write. They don't write. Journalists don't document. They talk about others, they write about others, but they don't write about their experiences. So we are forced, as trainers of journalists, to reference our materials from Germany, from the UK, from America. Nothing domesticated. Nothing that is ours that we can speak about. So I'm going to take you on a small tour small tour of the journey that has brought us to the place that we are today. Safeguarding Nigeria's fourth estate, the issues of media resilience and sustainability. As I said, if media is a vocation, you don't really care about sustainability. You care about sustainability in as much as it is effective and delivering. But if media is a business, then you have to worry whether you're going to be able to pay your staff tomorrow. But if it is both, and who says it cannot be both? Then you need to find a way to be what Alhaji Joseph did in the 70s, in that he was able to make Daily Times one of the most profitable businesses in Nigeria, and yet they were able to confront government at every step of the way. And of course, the first thing that the next military government did when they came was to take over Daily Times without paying for it. In many ways, the story of the Nigerian media, its potentials, the grand power politics that is at play within the media, the enduring hope for change. We're always hoping that something will happen. Since the colonial era, it has been the same story of the Nigerian nation. If you were to parallel the story of the Nigerian nation with the story of the media, you will find that there is very little. And as one moves, so does the other. In 1922 is 102 years ago, when Clifford, Governor Clifford, established the first Nigerian constitution. The people that pushed him to do it were journalists. Herbert Macaulay and Thomas Jackson. They were the people who were running the Lagos Daily News and the Nigerian Spectator. It was their continuous campaign that led to allowing 4 members of the public to be voted into the Lagos Council. 4. And were those 4 effective? So if you look at the very institution of politics in Nigeria, the media had a hand in it. And they not only forced the government to enact the first constitution, they then set up various newspapers, to fight continuously. Okay? Now, if you look at some of the foremost nationalists in Nigeria, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Ernest Ikoli, Anthony Enahoro, S.L. Akintola, the list goes on. Oba Akisoya. These were all, they are mostly remembered as nationalist politicians, but they started life as journalists. And they migrated. In fact, it was journalism that brought them into prominence and gave them the platform to become leaders. Now, the question that you need to put at the back of your mind as we have this discussion this morning is how come that these fellows who were so powerful as nationalists presided over a nation that crashed in 1966, because they were still all involved. What happened was that the fight that they fought against the British When the British decided to leave in 1947, they turned their swords against each other. And they recruited their armies from their ethnic groups. And so started, because I'm saying this because many times we like to talk about our founding fathers and their ideals. Their ideals were good in as far as they were fighting the British. But their ideals were very bad in as far as they were fighting each other. And how I wish we have started and we have stopped fighting each other in the media today. Have we? Let's move on. The second group, the second era I'd like to talk about very briefly is the post-independent. That was the pre-independence where we had the Azikiwe's transferring to become leader. The second era is the post-independent era, when politicians saw and used the media as a weapon of war. You don't want to be a journalist between 1959 and 1966 in Nigeria. I did a study. I went to, because again, part of our problem, we don't keep records. I had to go to British Library to read The Citizen. The Citizen, that was the paper that was published in the North. It was a northern paper, and it was replaced by New Nigeria in the 60s. I had to read the Tribune that was established in 1949, the West African Pilot, which was under Azikiwe. All these papers became war instruments. The Igbos against the Yorubas. The Tribune against the West African Pilot. You know? So that was what happened. And where did it lead us? Let me read to you an excerpt from 1965. The Nigerian Tribune wrote an editorial, 1965, before the collapse of the First Republic. It says, the country's press, unfortunately and inexplicably too, have pitched up their tents with this or that tribal war cry. War cry. Listen to the language. Principles of national unity has been sacrificed on the altar of petty tribal gods. This ethnic polarization, deeply embedded in the media, became one of the factors that destabilized Nigeria's early attempt at democracy. Instead of helping the young nation come together, the press was used to deepen regional and ethnic rivalries with disastrous consequences for the First Republic. Many media outfits died with the Civil War. West African Pilot died, and several other newspapers. Take you to the third era, the military, and the fight for press freedom. The collapse of the First Republic in 1966 and the rise of the military marked a new chapter for the Nigerian media. The press regained its voice and fighting spirit, but found itself in a precarious position, caught between speaking the truth to power and surviving authoritarian regimes. The military governments were quick to suppress dissent, shutting down newspapers and harassing journalists who dared to challenge them. Those who resisted, like Punch, Newswatch, Guardian, all paid heavy prices. I had a mentor, a friend, an editor, a brother who died in the process. I saw Dele Giwa on a Friday after, I saw him on a Saturday. On Saturday morning, he was having breakfast. I had that same table where they killed him. Wole Soyinka had just been given the Nobel Prize. And Newswatch had sent me to Enugu to interview, because I was going from campus to campus to interview literature professors and English professors and all the eggheads. And we're going to do a big piece on Wole Soyinka. So I stopped over at his place on my way to the airport to take a flight to Enugu. I came back the next day to view his broken body, decimated by a parcel bomb at the hospital the very next day. So I was close. I saw we lost people in that fight. People lost their job, lost their livelihood, incarcerated under the military. The fourth era. The rise of the media moguls and commercial influences. I think it was, unfortunately, I think I was somehow part of this, but it wasn't what we intended. In 1987, we had the first communication policy debate, policy conference in Topo, Badagry. I was advisor to the minister, freshly minted from an American university, so they thought I was very bright. So we went to craft the first media policy ever. Back in 2004, somebody tried to upgrade that. But the point I wanted to make is this. Part of that policy led to the commercialization and deregulation of the Nigerian media. Okay, it took us quite a while to achieve that. And the government made the mistake of saying, now that we are commercializing and deregulating, therefore, NTA and radio should become commercial. They should go and look for their money. Mistake. Because that problem between are we a vocation or are we a business showed up again. Because, of course, NTA started something they call let them pay. You know, even that slogan alone tells you the spirit. You know, so if you brought an advert, if you wanted to be featured in the news, you have to pay. So news became commercialized. And anybody that had money to establish a medium became a media mogul. And rather than acting as watchdogs, many media houses became instruments to reinforce existing power structure. Enter the social media that further now complicated everything about media. Now, I've been saying we probably need an extra chair up front here. Yes, you can. Yeah. Welcome. Enter the social media. Neither fish nor bird. The biggest mistake that we as trainers, I'm sure that I'm glad that Isaac is here. Where are you? Okay. He's a trainer of media people. Now, the people that need media training the most right now are people who call themselves social media influencers. And nobody is doing anything about that. Because they need to be trained in the principles, in the restraints, in the objectivity, if there's any such things, in the balance. You know, you can't publish anything. Yesterday I got a post that says that there was an explosion in Jos. Okay, when you read that there's an explosion in Jos, what comes to your mind immediately? Wow, jihadist, terrorist, you know, and everybody was posting it. I checked, I went on Google, I said, explosion in Jos? It turns out that there was an explosion, but it was not what the media was mostly reporting. It was a mines explosion. Check, you know, we need to train our social media people. We need to find a reason. And you know, Nigerians like certificates. So if can I give myself a job? Ime, where are you? She stepped out. Okay. I think Insdec, Ogieboigwe, and Frank, myself, we're going to look for a way to railroad business, social media people, influencers, and get PAU to give them certificates. And in the process, we would have at least told them a truth or a thing or two about what it means to be a journalist. So we are now in an era of media capture. And those of you who read about media, you know about media capture. The phenomenon where the powerful elite control the media, shaping narratives and silencing opposition voices. This has become very strong in our nation. If you have money, establish a newspaper, establish a radio station. I was talking with a retired general. I don't want to say more than that, so I don't disclose too much. And he was telling me about his radio stations. And I was shocked. I said, that one too is yours? He said, yes. And he was laughing and he said, you foolish people, you think I am a fool. Media licenses have been given to those, I don't agree. When the press is controlled by a small group of powerful individuals, it no longer serves the public interest. That's what media capture is all about. And a few groups, a few individuals have captured the media, and there are consequences for that. Media outlets aligned with specific groups have become battlegrounds for ethnic narratives. Instead of building a sense of national unity, the media now reinforce the idea of a fractured country where politics is seen as a zero-sum game. What are the consequences of a captured media? Separatist agitations. The Ogonis felt neglected. The oil-producing states felt cheated. The northern minorities felt left out. The West felt robbed. The core North felt that they only held titles, but not real power. The East has always felt oppressed and marginalized. That is the nation that we now live in. I think it was Egosa Osagai who wrote a book on every hamlet wants a state, you know. That is where we have found ourselves. The second, I'm now talking to you about what exists today. The second thing that we find about this type of media is over-reliance on external media, external funding, on external funding. So, because the media doesn't have a business model that can sustain it, they have to rely on these same politicians and media elite to fund them. And they don't have a sustained media model for Africa. The few that have tried to didn't really invent a media model. They copied and pasted. They wanted to be the New York Times of Africa, of Nigeria. And they lost the nuances of what it means to be a media person in Nigeria. The second thing, and the third thing, was that there was a shift towards sensationalization. It's in academia, it's called poor journalism, when there is a focus on entertainment, sex, scandals, and sports. That becomes the focus of media. Tell me any news organization today that is not over-focused on entertainment and has not left the areas where we're supposed to be. The fourth thing is a lack of investment in staff development. I once was talking with an editor of a major Nigerian newspaper, and he told me, I was trying to recruit CEOs for training in our institution then. And I asked him, I said, listen, have you ever gone for training sponsored by your organization? And he said, no, never been. And if I mention the organization, you'll be shocked. How does he train? Private institutions train him. So the Coca-Colas of this world and the breweries of this world train him, and they pay PAU to train them. And in the process, these organizations chip in their words about their own. It's the only best that we have right now. So I'm not disparaging it. I'm only saying that more media institutions ought to train their people. Bankers trained. I was talking with my new brother, the SAN, this morning, and talking about the erudition of the average lawyer, or average good lawyer, average reading lawyer. You know, bankers train all the time. A journalist training? Our case has been made worse, as I was saying a moment ago, because the people who now claim to be media experts, the influencers, you have an iPad, you could be a journalist. In fact, you don't need an iPad, just a phone. The fifth problem is there is a resistance to digital transformation. We talk about the digital. We lip sync. We are excited to talk about it, but we have not owned that journey. It's not ours. There is a reluctance to fully embrace digital innovation. And this has left many newspapers and radio stations struggling to keep pace with global trends. I was talking with a gentleman, and he said, you know the problem that most of your media people have? And I said, no, I don't. He said, they think analog, and then they try to implement digital. It's never going to happen. And he said, what you need to do first is to think digital. End of story. I don't know the philosophical explanation for that, but I think it's true. Because we are not thinking digital right now at all. And so, it's neither a fish nor a bird. We are not fully digitized, and we are not fully analog. The sixth problem that has arisen out of a media that has been confiscated by or rather captured, is that we become vulnerable to special interests. Special interests, whether they are commercial interests or political interests. And that's because we can't fund ourselves, and yet we feel we need to be what we have called ourselves out to be. And the special interests take over, and we become open to manipulations by people who want to use us to achieve their objectives. So, how do we reclaim the media for the people? Now, you see, in a setting like this, you will find us talking when these wise people come later, and people will be talking about, oh, we need reformation, we need reformation. We need more than reformation. Reformation implies, reformation could be a paint over, but you need more than a paint over. We need to change culture. To do that, we need to understand what our own Nigerian culture is and what kind of media fits that culture, and how do we implement it to become, please pardon me to use the word viralized, if there's such a word. I'm allowed to create words, right? As history has shown, the press can, or the media can unite us. It can also divide us. We are in that state now where I feel that we are very fragile as a people. I'm not sure we know the direction in which our nation is traveling. And if we, the media, don't know, who knows? The nation has little or no ideology. I'm using that word loosely. And because we don't have that, neither does the media. And that because the media doesn't have, we are basically just rambling, like blindfolded people in the same room. What are my recommendations? there's a concept, and I'm holding a class on this on Tuesday. Isaac Ezechukwu has invited me to do that. It's called solution journalism, and I think you've witnessed it in South Africa, Frank. Was it in Kenya? Kenya, solution journalism, where we do more than criticize, where we do more than report, where we also suggest solutions to the problem that we are reporting on. Last year, I undertook with my colleagues here, we undertook to do a study on the state of the nation, and we recruited about 7 or 8, 9 professors from the University of Lagos. We had several meetings. We were talking, we were meeting, we had overnight meetings, and we produced a document. I actually wanted to bring it, I don't know how, I wanted to show you what I'm talking about. We produced a document this thick. I read through, and I said, and they said, what? I said, and they said, what? I said, you have told us you are regurgitating the problems that I already know. I'm looking for solutions. What are we going to do about the state of the nation? Do you know why we couldn't produce solutions? Because we have not allowed thinkers to come into the room. Nigeria is a nation that has thinkers, but they are thinking for other lands. They are thinking for other nations. Nigeria is a nation that has thinkers, but they are thinking for their tribes and their ethnic groups. So you have thinkers for the Afenifere, they call DAWN, Development Agenda for Western Nigeria. You have thinkers for the Ohaneze Ndibo. You have thinkers for Arewa. They meet at Arewa House in Kaduna. You have thinkers for Pandef, for Middle Belt Forum. And the question I have been asking anybody who cares to listen is this: who is thinking for Nigeria? Who is thinking for Nigeria? Ms. Musa, 1 minute. Just be patient. Let your temperature come down. Otherwise, mine will just be going up. Okay, who is thinking for Nigeria? Who is thinking for our nation? Who is thinking for our nation? Who is not thinking for an ethnic group? We must develop viable business alternatives, business models. I say viable in the case, in the state of Nigeria, in the culture of Nigeria, not something that New York Times is doing, not something that Wall Street Journal is doing, something that is applicable here, something that you can implement here. Of course, they will tell us about subscription models, about membership programs, about events and conferences, about crowdfunding, but that's not what we need. What you need is to be relevant. I'm not saying that these ones are not good and they are not relevant, but they are made for the same elite group that brought us to where we are. What I think we have missed in media formations in Nigeria is that media serves a community. Let me explain. And that community doesn't need to be geographic anymore because of social media. Media serves communities. Every media is local. Any media that is not local, serving a particular community, is not fit for purpose. I will want you to help me. New York what? Washington what? Los Angeles what? They are all city newspapers. Chicago what? Chicago Tribune. Every media is local. But here, all our media want to be national. If you live in Surulere, how many of us live in Surulere here? Surulere, okay, that's. When last did you read something in the Nigerian media or hear a story about Surulere? None. We don't write for the people. We are not relevant. We're not relevant. We write for Alausa. We write for Aso Rock. We write for Central Bank. We write for MTN. We write to be read by Nitel. But we don't write for the people. Now, I have a mental experiment, and I'm going to end with this, because that lady is harassing me. I have a mental experiment. Imagine that I started publishing a Jegunle Herald, and it's a 4-page or an 8-page newspaper, or I establish an Jegunle radio. And that Ajegunle Herald is distributed Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at Boundary. So when you come out of your house to take a bus to CMS, Ajegunle Herald, I just give it to you free. Do you think it will make money? It will. It will make money. You say? The model already exists. Exactly. But what I'm saying is that we can implement it. BusinessDay can have BusinessDay Lagos, BusinessDay Abuja, BusinessDay, but make it local. Make each publication local. Make it relevant to the people. As long as we want to be the Wall Street Journals of Nigeria, or New York Times of Nigeria, or Washington Post of Nigeria, even though those papers themselves are local papers, we are going to continue making the mistakes that the media has been making over so many years. Media can both be a vocation and a business. Media can be sustained if we make ourselves relevant to the people on the street who are desirous of news, of information, who want to be guided, who are confused about so many things, and they are looking for answers. And because the mainstream media have not taken their position, what has happened is that social media, influencers, have taken up our positions, and they are doing very well. Before I sit down, Frank, you permit me to mention this. We published this this October, Unraveling Nigeria's Insecurity Crisis, the Urgent Need for Lasting Solutions. One of my staff is here. Samuel, are you? Okay, just stand up. If you need a copy of this, just leave your name with him. I actually brought this for you, sir. So I'll give it to you. We believe that you must provide solutions. Any medium that is not providing solution, somebody is paying him to do what he's doing. And that person doesn't mean well. God bless you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that brilliant keynote address Oftentimes they say that journalists are some of the best storytellers, and I'm sure you would agree with that. Once again, please let's put our hands together for Dr. Richard Ikebe for that brilliant keynote. So we will now be taking the opening address. I'd like to apologize because we were supposed to take it earlier, but because we had the representative on his way and he's here now, so we will be going for the opening address, and this opening address will be given to us by the Honorable Minister of Information and National Orientation of Nigeria, represented by the Director General and CEO of the Nigeria Press Council, Dr. Dili Ezuaga. Please put your hands together as it comes up, please. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
I apologize for coming late. I'm not known for that, but this is Lagos. I came in last flight last night. The information to come represent the minister was very sudden. He's not in the country. And I was actually stretched out on a hospital bed. I was going to have surgery when the message came. So I asked the surgeon, how much time, how much life does my right eye have? Can it survive 1 month? He says, yes, you have 1 month. I said, okay, let's unstrap. We'll do this at a later date. That's how important this gathering is, wrote to the minister. But then I came in and Lagos happened and I came late. I'm sorry about that. But it's a good thing that Dr. Richard did his job for me. You know, when you've had an uninterrupted journey in the media for 44 years, that's huge. But then you come into a place like this, you meet Dr. Richard, you meet Frank, and this is a red cap, I can't take it off without bow. Thank you. I'm here. So I'm going to give the minister's speech. Permit me, I have to bring it up. I have to read with one eye. He says this to thank you, Frank, for doing this. It's important, especially at a time like this, when we are going through a reformative, an economic restructuring in this country that's beginning to yield good and tangible results. But the hardships left in its wake make it difficult for people to understand that. And that's where he drew our attention to why we are the fourth estate of the realm. And he says we should remember where this term came from. It derives from the traditional European concept of the three estates of the realm, namely the clergy, the nobility, and the commoners. The press came in as the fourth, emerged and became a potent force in molding public opinion and holding other estates, the other three, accountable. With time, that term became synonymous with the press in its capacity to report the news without advocacy and political bias. This gives an idea why the media should be a partner in governance. We should report accurately. We're a partner with government, a partner in governance. Like Richard said, we know more than our compatriots because of the position we occupy. And when we realize that we're working hand in hand with government, that we should report bearing that in mind. Thank you. Wishes you a very good deliberation in your discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much Thank you very much, the representative of the Honorable Minister, for giving us that welcome address. Thank you again. Please put your hands together for him, please. Thank you. So we will be going to another session, which is on democracy and press freedom. And this session will be handled by the Executive Director of the International Press Center, Lagos, Nigeria, Mr. Lanre Arogundade. Please put your hands together as it comes up, if it's here. Okay. It will be joining us virtually, so.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Let me say very good morning to Oga Frank, and thank Dr. Richard Ekebe for that very, very stimulating keynote speech. I want to assume that you can hear me. Good.
Thank you, sir.
Great. And I already sent my presentation. I don't know if it can be shared so that for the audience down there to see. Well, I'm here to speak on perspectives on the press freedom and democracy in Nigeria. This is not a kind of a footnote to that brilliant keynote speech. But even in that keynote speech, it did touch on the issue of press freedom, the struggle for press freedom under the military. And I guess one of the things that would interest us in the course of this presentation is the fear that things may even be getting worse than we had under the military. So this is just a kind of perspectives on the state of press freedom in Nigeria. And because I have just 15 minutes, I will try to move a little bit fast. The focus here is Nigeria, and we're trying to look at some of the threats to issues of press freedom. And this is just a short presentation, gives an overview of the whole concept of press freedom and democracy. And I try to rely on some authorities by stating that essentially when we talk of press freedom, we're looking at the principle that communication and expression through the media should be a fundamental right. And as we do know in this audience, Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that everyone has a right to freedom of opinion and expression, and that the right includes freedom to hold such opinions without interference, and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media, regardless of the frontiers. This is the way press freedom is defined. And the other authorities have said that when we talk of freedom of the press, we're looking at the power of journalists, of publishers, and other media to uncover share information. In other words, freedom doesn't
group of stakeholders.
Okay. The kind of information that would enlighten the citizens, that is what the whole idea of press freedom is about. And so looking at that, we go forward to emphasize the importance of press freedom in our society, and also rely on some other authorities. Now, in this presentation, I did say that the best evidence of the interconnectedness of press freedom and democracy is the provision of Section 22 of our Constitution, which enjoins the media to monitor governance and hold government accountable to the people. And the link to the people in that particular section of the Constitution should actually remind us that the roots of press freedom, which in a way is an offshoot of the right to freedom of expression, is actually the right of the people to know. And I guess this should always be at the back of our minds in terms of our obligation to society. So when we say we have press freedom, that press freedom, we need it so that we can catalyze the right of the people to know. And in any case, it has to be the right of the people to know the truth. Professor Ivo Geba has been a visiting professor to Pan Atlantic University, and he likes to talk about what is called the democratic prerequisites. And I just quickly refer to it here because it underlies, or rather provides some context into the importance of press freedom in any society. So when we talk of democracy, there are things that are supposed to be taken for granted, and 7 of them have been identified by Professor Ivo Geba. The first is that without an informed consent, there's no democracy. Of course, you need the media for such informed consent. And I must say here that I agree with Dr. Ikebe that if the media would provide informed content, it has to build knowledge, it has to build skills, and therefore training and retraining should be a constant. Then the second one, in terms of democratic prerequisite, is that the media must be free to criticize the government. Are we free to criticize the government? The guest from the embassy spoke about the fact that he enjoys the Nigerian media because we freely publish things. When you look at the other side, you might discover that sometimes what the media publishes in Nigeria is what the powers that be wants the media to publish. Then it talks about the need for private media to have strong markets and diversity of ownership. That is very important because sustainability and economic empowerment is also important when we're talking of press freedom. Then effective laws on media freedom is considered essential. Strong journalists and media organizations are required. Government must recognize the value of opposition. I guess Professor Geba said this in the context of the parliamentary democracy, because in our presidential system, I do not think we really value opposition. And of course, the spirit of tolerance, and freedom. So in this brief introduction, there are 2 points for us to emphasize. And the first is that press freedom does not preclude the media's social responsibility. In other words, and that's why I kept emphasizing the right of the people to know, the media must know that it has to be accountable to the people. Hence, we have the various codes of ethics or codes of conduct of the media profession, which I think we need to take much more seriously. Then the second, looking at what I've just said so far, is that press freedom definitely needs institutional and legislative safeguards for it to be operational in any society. Now, let's now look at some current developments in terms of threats to press freedom and the challenges facing media resilience in Nigeria. And my introduction here is that despite the recognition that the media is a vital institution for the sustenance of democracy, and that in fact it serves as catalyst of development, because there's a linkage between press freedom and actual development, because where the press is able to hold leaders accountable, you are likely to have much more development. But here in Nigeria, in spite of this recognition, we keep witnessing major threats to press freedom and the safety of journalists, which also constitutes threats to democracy itself. Of greater concern to us, those of us who work in the media development or press freedom sector, is the fact that we are having increasing impunity for crimes against journalists as perpetrated either offline or online. The online arena is becoming a major arena of these threats. And so when we talk of threats, we're looking at a situation that actually cuts across the digital and the non-digital space. So lawyers, and I'm glad Mr. Tayo Yetibo senior advocate of Nigeria, will be speaking later. Lawyers have this popular saying that they say ipsa res loquitur, that is, the facts speak for itself. And so yearly, since democracy in 1999, the facts that we get is that of increasing assault on the media. And I dare say that by the time we finish the documentation we are trying to do now, we'll probably be documenting more than 500, if not close to 1,000 incidents of attacks on journalists since the return of democracy 25 years ago. In 2023, the Committee to Protect Journalists documented 56 attacks in Nigeria. But if we come nearer home, this year alone, we are terrified, we're worried, because from what you can see on the screen, we've had about 36 attacks, and this is just for January to August. And what this tells you is that not a single month has gone in year 2024 that one journalist or more than one journalist have not been attacked in Nigeria. And we give the information about the number per month from what you have, with August being the highest of 18, and that the reason for that should be a bit obvious. And that was when we had the end bad governance protests. If you also look at the picture I'm trying to give of the state of threats to press freedom, you would also see that the attacks really do not know gender. So we have 32 male journalists and then 5 female. In about 24 instances, we couldn't really determine the gender of the journalists affected. And just to buttress what I was saying, that these things take place across the media, the broad media spectrum. It affected 10 print media, 15 broadcast media, 19 online, and in about 17 cases, we couldn't really pinpoint the organization. But let's look at the alleged perpetrators, and I think this is what should also be of interest to us. Security operatives, 25 of them. So if we are looking at the trajectory that Dr. Ikibi provided for us in terms of the history of the media and the history of the country, what we see when it comes to our security agencies is that, yes, they are security agencies and they will still be security. Military will still be military. But in the context of democracy, we expect some demilitarization of their mentality, particularly in relation to dealing with the media. The sight of a journalist on election duty somewhat provokes anger, or some you cannot explain when it comes to our security agents. So they are still the largest perpetrators. But we also have unknown persons, armed robbers, hoodlums, and thugs, bandits, armed youths, and so on. Now, some of these elements we've discovered are actually sponsored, by politicians, and that is what we have seen. I have identified what I call 6 striking, worrisome developments that we can extract or extrapolate from the picture that I've just painted. The first is that increasingly, because we're in a democracy, so under military, it was very straightforward. They rule by decrees, or sometimes without any law at all, and it's what they want that they get. But here we're in a democracy and we're supposed to be guided by laws. But so we have laws, and there's a cynical use of legal instruments to suppress the rights of journalists, and that's what we've seen. So I say here that when you think, then we have the Cybercrime Act, Agba Jalingo. We're currently doing a study in the International Press Center about a number of journalists that have been illegally detained under the Cybercrime Act. So a journalist publishes something, a private organization, a corporate organization, or even an individual feels aggrieved. Then the next thing, you report to the police. Then the police says you have engaged in cyberbullying. And that journalist is not taken to court, but is kept in detention for 2-3 weeks, sometimes months, before they are finally charged. We're worried about this. And then we have lack of investigation and prosecution of perpetrators of these attacks. And then there's the dangerous trend, this is the number 3 one, of non-state actors making use of state institutions. So when we say security agents are responsible for 25 of those attacks, by the time you do further investigation, you discover that perhaps 5 or 10 of those cases didn't originate originally from the security agents themselves. It was simply cases of a business person or a business interest who felt threatened by a report, reporting, to the police. So it's instructive. The example of Abdul Rashid Hamad, for example, a freelance journalist who did a story on water factories in Sokoto State. These are pure water factories. They were producing poisonous water for citizens to consume. And after that report came out, the DSS started harassing him, asking him to come to Abuja, to Sokoto to report. Ordinarily, we thought that such a journalist should have been given an award by NAFDAC, the institution established to do this kind of thing. So we see this kind of threats, non-state actors, political and economic forces who operate clandestinely to undermine independence and accountability journalism. So on the surface, you see the military or security agent, but in reality, they are the ones, beating the drum under the water. So the next one is that we're having increasing threats to accountability journalism, particularly investigative journalism. There is always the feeling that there's no more investigative journalism in Nigeria, that it went with the past era. But truly, a number of young people, and we've seen some laudable examples, female, male journalists, Fisayo Shoyombo and the rest of them, doing investigative journalism, but they are always almost under threat. Then my second to the last point here, before I wrap up with the way forward, is that I'm giving you statistics now, 36 journalists detained, so number of them male, so number of female, and so on and so forth. These are just statistics. These are just figures. These are just facts that we publish, World Press Freedom Day, November 2, and so on. But do we know the consequences for these journalists? These journalists who were blindfolded, who were chained, like the case of Daniel Ojukwu and many of them. Investigations have shown that we hardly report the psychosocial consequences of the numerous attacks. They tend to be hidden behind the figures. In some documentations that we have done at the International Press Center of journalists who were attacked during COVID-19 and journalists who were attacked under NSAS, many of them confess to the fact that they had problems. At the last World Press Freedom Day, a female journalist who was assaulted at a football stadium in Ijebu said for weeks she could not go back to that stadium as a sports reporter, simply because of the fear that she would be recognized again and she might be assaulted. Finally, as I hinted, we're beginning to think that the threats to press freedom under this democracy seems to be even worse than under the military. And I'm sure people will say, oh, is that possible? Yes, it's actually possible, because even under the military, you were detained, you still had lawyers who still go to court to challenge the basis of that decision as to whether you were properly detained under Decree 2 or Decree 4. That was what the likes of Gani Fawehinmi, Akabashorun, and the younger generation of Falana were doing that time. And I'm sure that Mr. Oyetibo will speak to this. So this is what we've seen in terms of threat to press freedom, and we have to look for the way forward, because Dr. Ekebe emphasized solution. What is the solution? Solution journalism, solution to press freedom threats. I have a few here, and my first recommendation is that we must do everything possible to ensure that Nigeria aligns with the United Nations safety standards. The United Nations Plan of Action on Safety of Journalists emphasizes 3 pillars, or that we normally call 3 Ps. It talks about protection, prevention, and prosecution. So what we're saying is that Nigeria as a country, the Nigerian government as a state, must take the lead in terms of, because we are part of UN, and every year we'll be at UN to give reports. In fact, the United Nations expects each member state to give annual report on steps they are taking to protect journalists or to ensure the safety of journalists. So we need to focus on how we protect journalists, how we prevent them, and how we ensure that there's prosecution where the alleged perpetrators are identified. And that leads me to the second recommendation, that as a way of giving meaning or implementing the UN 3 Ps, I'm proposing that we should have what we call a national mechanism for press freedom and safety of journalists in Nigeria. The International Press Center started this initiative in 2022. We convened, a stakeholders forum. The idea has since expanded. It has been embraced by the likes of CJI, the Center for Journalism, Innovation and Development, Media Rights Agenda. We have had series of meetings. And the whole idea is for us to sit, for those of us in this sector, to sit with those in government and look at the challenges and look at best practices in other countries where this kind of mechanisms have been put in place, so that there can be an agreement that where there are violations, there will be prosecution, where there can be an agreement that measures will be taken to prevent. And I think by next week, the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism will be convening another forum to take forward this initiative. So hopefully, if we have this, it might be a way of getting out of this big challenge of a threat to press freedom. Then my next recommendation on way forward is that there should be more advocacy against attacks. There is a tendency for only few people to speak when journalists are attacked. And we think that an attack on the media is an attack on the society. Businesses, civil society organizations need to speak out each time we have this incident. But more importantly, we need to encourage the kind of examples set by an organization like Media Rights Agenda, which has decided to use the instrument of the law to fight, for press, freedom. And that's why, for example, it got a court judgment that says that cases of journalists who had been killed should be reopened. And in the specific case of Lagos State, where a journalist was killed during the NSAS protest, Media Rights Agenda has gotten a court judgment that says that the Lagos State government must investigate the circumstances of the death of that journalist. I think this is quite important. Then, economic sustainability. It's important for us to recognize that economic barriers are also threats to press freedom. And we can extract this from the submission of the keynote speaker, Dr. Ikebe. And so we need to explore how we can better use technology, possible media mergers. These days you see an explosion in the online environment. Some of these online news mediums are owned by professional journalists who have been into the newsroom, who have been news editors, who have been editors. But everybody just wants to have his own beat. And even for the established ones, I think we can look at possibility of mergers. I also submit that we can also look at the possibility of government funding. I know there will be a session later that talks about funding. But my own is that we can look at possibility of state funding. I don't like using government, for public interest reporting. So at elections, for example, the media does a lot of civic and voter education, talking to the people, carrying messages from INEC and so on. Can we have a mechanism where the media, through direct appropriation by the National Assembly, is paid for this? Those who are experts in economic issues may want to look at this. Then I think we need more legal reforms, and we need to review and reform a number of outdated media laws. If you look at the laws establishing the National Broadcasting Commission, the Nigerian Press Council, my good friend is Lily. You see now, Lily has just come to deliver the message of the Honorable Minister of Information. We don't want media regulators to be, I don't like that. It's not what we want, really. We want you to be independent. We don't want you to be a subdivision of the office of the Minister of Information. That is not independence. And I know there are many things you want to do that you can't do. We engage regularly with National Broadcasting Commission, with Nigerian Press Council. We normally have off the camera discussions. And I know that they want some measure of independence because they are not happy the way we back them. Some of the things we back them for, they are not things that they would ordinarily do on their own. So part of press freedom is the freedom of the media regulatory bodies, so that the media can act in the interest of the industry as against the interest of the government in power. We need to look at this. Then second to the last is about journalistic welfare. Welfare itself is a press freedom issue. So where the welfare of journalists are threatened, their press freedom could be threatened, because in our engagements, I mean, the International Press Center is 25 years old this year, and I must say we probably must have engaged over 5,000, if not more than that, journalists across the country, many more through our publications, perhaps up to about 25,000. And that issue keeps coming up. That, well, they just leave us like that. They don't pay us salaries for months, for years, and so then they get them to do some dirty jobs, and then the security agents start running after them. For us, as International Press Center, lack of salaries is, we don't accept that as an excuse to engage, to breach the ethics of the profession. But we also know that this is a reality that we are regularly confronted with. So it will be important for media proprietors to pay greater attention to the welfare of journalists, because it in itself is a threat to press freedom. And then very, very finally, the question of social responsibility, very, very important. I think that journalists and media outlets must uphold their commitment to social responsibility, because if the more we are able to be socially responsible, the more we have stronger voice to say that the threat against us is because they don't want us to publish the truth. It shouldn't be that it's because we're publishing falsehood or the rest of them. These are my thoughts, and I want to appreciate the BusinessDay Foundation for having me. And I must say that I wish I was physically on ground there to be part of this conversation. And I just hope I've been able to get across my thoughts to the audience. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lanre Arogundade, for giving us that session and for giving us all of the way forward on what we're speaking about today, which is empowering the fourth estate of the realm. We will now be moving to our next session, and this next session will be on legal framework for press freedom, and to be handled by Mr. Tayo Oyetibo, SAN FNIALS, and is the Chief Counsel and Founding Partner at Tayo Oyetibo LP. Please make him feel welcome as he comes. Thank you very much.
I think it's almost afternoon now. Yes, so I wouldn't say midday. Good morning, everyone. My pleasure to be here to speak on legal frameworks for press freedom. My love for the media actually drove me. I'm a lawyer of over 40 years practice, but I decided to establish a law radio station, which is probably the first in Africa, because of my love for the media. But I found that the terrain, I was talking to Dad a few minutes ago, that is a completely different terrain from what I was used to. I credit those who are in that area. It's just not easy. The media, as we know it outside the profession, is completely different when you go into it. And I think I've had the taste of it. So I credit you, Frank, for Ted, I credit you, because I've known them for several years and they are still on the road. God bless you as we continue. So I'll be speaking on these legal frameworks for press freedom. And I started by saying that the press, which is generally regarded as the fourth estate, plays a critical role in shaping the society alongside other institutions such as the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. In looking at the constitutional frameworks, the legal frameworks, I look at the constitutional framework, I looked at the statutory framework, and then the judicial framework, and then concluded by saying what it is, how all of these segments have treated press freedom. Starting with a constitutional framework, we have a provision in the Constitution which will seem to guarantee press freedom, but does it really do so? And that takes us to section 39 of the Constitution. I'll read it out, what it says, and you can be the judge of what the provision actually says. It says that, section 39, it says that every person, and I said that advisedly so that you can understand what it means. Every person shall be entitled to freedom of expression, including freedom to hold opinions and to receive and impart ideas and information without interference. Does it say the press? So, when we are talking of constitutional guarantee of freedom of the press, this is what you can find in the Constitution. It covers every person, not necessarily the media nor the press, which means the Constitution does not specially recognize the role of the press in granting press freedom. The freedom that the press enjoys is the freedom that you as a non-journalist and I as a non-journalist enjoy under the Constitution. So that is the scope of press freedom that is written into our Constitution. Now, flip back to section 22 of the Constitution. Whereas it does not give express right to press freedom, when it comes to obligation, it mentions the press. In section 22, it says that the mass media, the press, the radio, the television, and other agencies of the mass media shall at all times be free to uphold the fundamental objectives contained in chapter 2 of the Constitution and uphold the responsibility and accountability of the government to the people. What is the difference? When it comes to freedom, it gives to every person. When it comes to obligation, it mentions the press. So, whereas you have a duty to hold the government to its role under the Constitution, when it comes to freedom, it is the same level of every. Why does it not say every person in section 22? Why is it mentioning, itemizing them, press, radio, television, and other agencies? So, this is the framework that we have under the Constitution. The press is recognized for its obligation, but it is not recognized for its freedom. The problem now we have is chapter 2 is not justiciable. That's section 22, which specifically mentions the press and other mass media, is not justiciable. What is meant by not justiciable? You cannot go to court and enforce those provisions. But you can go to court for section 39, which is contained in chapter 4 of the Constitution, to enforce your right to freedom of speech or press freedom within the scope of what the Constitution provides. So there is a difference between the obligation of the press under the Constitution and the right to freedom of press under the Constitution. Now go to the statutory framework. What do we have in terms of statutory provisions in relation to press freedom? I started with the Freedom of Information Act. Again, does it recognize the special right of the press? The answer is no. It says that in section 1, the act guarantees the right of any person to request for information from any public institution or public body. So it is not specifically made for the press. The right which the press has under that provision to ask for information from any public institution is the same right that any other person has. So you cannot claim that because you belong to this particular industry, as you have extraordinary right in asking for the information to inform the public. Of course, it says that you need not have an interest in the particular information that you are asking for before it can be made available to you. Any person can ask for it. And it gives you to go to court if within 7 days the information is not released to you, save for certain exceptions which you cannot claim as of right, like information relating to security or intelligence or trade secrets or the like. You cannot, as of right, ask for such information. But the important thing that we must note is that no special right has been granted to the press or other agencies of the mass media under that particular provision. It is the same as every other person. Then we have the defamation law. You can go to the next slide. The defamation law of Lagos State. Many other states have a similar provision. This one grants to every person again, but the press usually make use of this, the right to publish a fair and accurate report of court proceedings if published contemporaneously with the proceedings concerned. That is, while the proceedings is going on in court, any journalist can cover the proceedings of the court and report if it is a fair and accurate proceeding report. What this means is that irrespective of the content of the story, whether the person concerned considers it libelous or defamatory or whatsoever, if it was in the course of the proceedings of the court that the report was taken and published, you are covered by what we call absolute privilege. You cannot be taken for defamatory publication. Then proceedings of legislative or public legislative houses or public inquiry or any international conference, you can also cover that, but that is qualified privilege if you have any misgiving as to the contents of the information. The law also provides for operators of websites. If, for example, a media organization has information on its website, other people post information there, you can escape liability if you can show that the information posted on the website was not put there by you. There are also exceptions provided under the law if it is shown that your attention was drawn to the falsity of such information. Then the Cyber Crimes Act also creates offenses for cyber stalking. I know that's not the normal way of practicing journalism, but today we have different, like the keynote speaker was talking about, influencers. So if you engage in cyber stalking, it's a crime under the Cyber Crimes Prohibition Act. So I move to the National Broadcasting Commission Act. If you look at the National Broadcasting Commission Act, I call it the special provision which ordinarily was supposed to protect the broadcasting industry. But what do we have? I say, regrettably, the Commission appears to have been more active in curtailing the freedom of broadcasting stations to freely inform the public than protecting the industry. But one of the functions of the industry is to protect the broadcasting industry. But it is not so. They get once there's any broadcasting information about the government, you see the NBC running all over the place to curtail or to caution the station concerned. Most probably because those who run that particular commission were appointed by government. Otherwise, if you are not a government employee, you develop thick skin. If you say something about government is not correct, it's the government to come out and say it is not correct. Why should you shut down the station? But because there's somebody up there that is warning them, look at what your boys are broadcasting. Can you call them to order? I think that is the problem we have when you have an institution that is supposed to regulate the media and is subject to control by the government. That is a problem. You will recall that in the year 2019, some stations were asked to pay fines. And I think the Media Rights Agenda took that case to court, and they succeeded in getting it nullified. That the power of the commission to impose fines was an incursion into judicial functions, because you become the accuser, the prosecutor, and the judge. I mean, that's never done. That is against the provisions of Section 36, subsection 1 of the Constitution. If you accuse someone of a crime, You allow an independent body to look at your accusation. But you cannot accuse me of doing something that is wrong, and you are the one to judge me, and you are the one to impose the fine on me. So the court said, no, you will not be allowed to do that. So that provision was nullified, which empowers the commission to impose fines. I will dwell a bit more on the Nigerian Press Council Act. I call it the sweet and sour law on press freedom, and I have my reasons for saying so. It is sweet because the council has as one of its functions the role of ensuring, it says, reviewing, it is given the responsibility of reviewing developments likely to restrict the supply through the press of information of public interest and importance, or which are capable of preventing free access of the press to information, and also advising on measures necessary to prevent or remedy such development. That is the sweet part of the provision setting up the council, because it is to protect the press if there's any harm coming in the way of the press. But let's look at the sour part of it. You now have the sour provisions, and that was why the Newspapers Proprietors Association of Nigeria went to court. We had the privilege of taking up the case on behalf of the organization, the MPN. Let's go through very quickly. I want to dwell more on this because of the sour provisions. Now, Section 1 establishes the council. The council, the chairman of the council is appointed by the president. Members of the council appointed by the minister. Now, Section 3 says that the council will have power to inquire into complaints against the press, adjudicate on the complaints, and monitor the activities of the press. Then Section 9 gives power to the council to ensure compliance with the code of conduct for journalists. Section 17 makes it a criminal offense for a journalist or news medium to refuse to comply with the disciplinary direction of the council. Then Section 19 makes it mandatory for journalists to register with the council under the rules that are to be made by the council. Section 20 gives the council the power to suspend a journalist or have their name struck out of the register of journalists for misconduct. Can you scroll up, please? Section 21 makes it a criminal offense for a person who is not registered to practice as a journalist. Then in 22, it empowers the council to approve course content for journalist training and the qualifications for registration as journalists. Sections 30, 31, and 32 make it mandatory for newspapers, magazines, and journals to submit their documentation and renew their documentation with the council yearly. Then Section 33 makes it a criminal offense for an undocumented newspaper, magazine, or journal to engage in publication or circulate such publication if you have not renewed your documentation. Then Sections 35 and 36 require every newspaper, magazine, and journal to submit to the council an annual return stating its mission statement and objectives and whether they have complied with them in the previous year. Failure to comply is a criminal offense. Now, the Newspapers Proprietors Association went to court to challenge the provisions. We succeeded in the High Court. Some of those provisions were nullified. They went to Court of Appeal. They succeeded in the Court of Appeal. We are in the Supreme Court presently. I will report to you when the judgment of the Supreme Court is out. But what is the point for discussion? It is a council meant to discipline journalists, and I don't think there's anything wrong in disciplining any members of a particular profession. In the legal profession, we have the legal practitioners disciplinary committee, but the members were not appointed by government. The members are lawyers. It's self-regulatory. So, if you have a disciplinary institution that is organized and controlled by government. And the people to be regulated are to monitor the accountability of government. How will I be able to perform my role if there's somebody that is wielding the big stick? If you monitor me too much, mind you, I have my medium of discipline you, and have to submit my documentation every year, tell you whether I have kept to the mission. What is my mission? It is for you to now judge whether I have kept to the mission or not to the mission. So I think there is something wrong with the act. And I think the government should be more relaxed in allowing the media to self-regulate. And I think that should be the objective of the MPN, the Guild of Editors, to approach the government that, look, we are not saying that we should not be regulated, but we want to regulate ourselves. Take off your hands from the regulation of the media, and we will submit to this act. So it needs just a few amendments here and there. Cross the T's, dot the I's, take the provisions of other professions. If other professions are self-regulatory, why do you want to put your hand in the regulation of the media? So I think essentially that is the battle. But as I said, they've won in the Court of Appeal, and we are presently before the Supreme Court. So I can't say more of that until the Supreme Court gives the final decision. Then I looked at the African Charter. Does the African Charter recognize special provision for, or provides for this press especially? The answer is no. What you have there is Article 9. It says every individual shall have the right to receive information, and Article 9 says every individual shall have the right to express and disseminate his opinions within the law. So when you take the Constitution, you take the statute, you take even at the international level, African Charter, it is still the same provision. Then I go further to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Here, there's a little improvement. It says in Article 19 of the Covenant, it provides for freedom of opinion, freedom of expression, access to information. But in the general comment on the provision, this is the way it is viewed. It says that the source of, journalists and other media practitioners shall not be required to reveal confidential sources of information or to disclose other material held for journalistic purposes, except where disclosure has been ordered by a court after a full and fair public hearing. Now, the problem with this is that though Nigeria has acceded to it, but the law has not been domesticated. Domesticated in the sense that under Section 12 of the Nigerian Constitution, when Nigeria accedes to an international treaty, before it can become a local law, there must be a law of the National Assembly to write it into the laws of Nigeria. We have that for the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. There is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights Ratification and Enforcement Act, which domesticated the provisions of the Charter, which means you can go to court to enforce the provisions of the Charter. But for international treaties that have not been domesticated, Nigeria is only responsible at the international level to the contracting states, not to the local citizen. You cannot go to court and apply for the enforcement of such provisions until the National Assembly deems it necessary to domesticate the provision. So we can then move on to judicial framework. How has the judiciary seen press freedom so far? The best we've got so far is law of sedition. It's been declared unconstitutional in the case of Chief Arthur Nwankwo and the state, when he criticized the governor of his state and he was charged with sedition, that he was trying to incite the people against the governor. The Court of Appeal said that the law of sedition is unconstitutional, that it violates Section 36, which is now Section 39 of the Constitution. But when you go further to the case of Ukegbu and the National Broadcasting Commission, it says that the guarantee given to the press under Section 39 is not absolute. That's what the attitude of the court. The court said that the right can be regulated when it comes to wireless broadcasting, television, films. That's the attitude of the court. Now, is the press the fourth estate? Generally, we say the press is the fourth estate. In this particular case, Tony Momo and the Senate, that was when the late Tony Momo was summoned by the National Assembly to come and disclose where he got the information that he has published criticizing the system. What was the attitude of the court in that case? I've taken out this quotation so that you can see how the court sees the press freedom that we are talking about. The court said, I see nothing in sections 21 and 36. That was the old constitution, which is now section 22 and 39 that we have talked about, to entitle a pressman or any other media man to any separate treatment. That's the court speaking, not me. Much as the press and other media have a very vital function to perform in our democratic system of government and could even be called the court of public opinion, there is nothing in our constitution to support the contention that they form the fourth arm of government or that they have press power in the same sense as we have the legislative, executive, and judicial powers of the Republic. These powers were shared out in part 2 of the chapter 1 of the Constitution, and the media do not come in for mention. But this pause here, this does not recognize section 22 that mentions the press specifically and gives the press the obligation of holding government to accountability. This appears to be an attempt to win through the courts the battle which the media fought in the Constituent Assembly and lost. That was the Constituent Assembly of 1978 when the press was trying to get specific recognition in the Constitution, but it failed. Section 21 is only one of the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy which are not justiciable. I've talked about that. And the right of freedom of expression under Section 36 is one which belongs to all who have to hold opinion, receive and impart ideas, or disseminate information, and contemplates no separate treatment to mass media. This is the situation we have. This is the dilemma. Then let's go further. What is the attitude of the court? In another passage, the court said, I am of the view that the law is the same in this country and that the press or any other medium of information cannot claim any right to confidentiality of the source of their information in a proper investigation by a house of the National Assembly or the police. So, if the Senate were properly exercising their power of investigation under Section 82, the respondent could not have refused, that is Tony Momo, to reveal the source of his information under any guise of confidentiality in view of Section 83 of the Constitution, which gives them powers analogous to the powers of a court. The press cannot claim any right of confidentiality in such cases. I must say that Tony Momo argued the case for himself. Chief Farami argued it for him in the High Court. He succeeded. I don't know what went wrong. When he got to Court of Appeal, he took over the case by himself and argued for himself. They did not discuss the issue of right to privacy in this case. They did not discuss the issue of right to remain silent under the Constitution. Because even if you are accused of a crime and the police ask you to make a statement, you have a right under the Constitution to remain silent. So, similarly, if the National Assembly calls anyone and says, come and speak, I can exercise my right to remain silent. I can say that I enjoy right to privacy between me and the man who communicated the information to me. All of those were not argued in this case. So we wait for another opportunity when such can be taken up. And this was before the Freedom of Information Act came into existence. So this is the old law as we speak. Then I take the case of Sun Publishing Limited and Aladima Medical Care. Why is it important? Because of this passage which you will find there. It says, ideally, freedom of the press should include the freedom to gather news, write it, publish it, and circulate it, But in most cases, and we have to note this, journalism is vulnerable by the nature of its ownership, audience, and political machinations. The reporters themselves and other professionals associated with the gathering, processing, and dissemination of news due largely to the failings and weaknesses inherent in the very nature of the human person do not seem to have helped matters. Press freedom guaranteed by the Constitution does not say that reporters should publish destructive stories about people's businesses without first having to conduct some investigation before hurrying to the press. Press freedom commands corresponding measure of responsibility on the part of the reporter, who must employ the highest level of professionalism in ensuring that a balanced and fair reportage of events are published as they have occurred. In the matter of the dissemination of news, the press must ensure the accuracy of its information before it passes it to others as gospel truth. This was the Court of Appeal speaking. To a large extent, this should represent the position of the law. There is no reason why any journalist should publish information irresponsibly. If you, like what the keynote speaker was saying earlier, explosion, it is the duty of the journalist to explain to the public what kind of explosion. Because if I see explosion, first of all, I might be afraid not to go to Jos or where the thing happened. I could just say explosion in Jos. If I have a friend going to Jos, are you aware there was explosion in Jos? Do you still want to go there? Because the explosion was not explained. You'll be scared to go to where there is explosion. Foreign papers may just pick explosion in Jos. They will send advisory. Avoid going to Jos in Nigeria. So I believe this is a correct statement of the law that journalists must publish with responsibility. You must investigate your stories and you must inform the public correctly. That is the duty of the media. I think I have one other provision there. Yes, that's the National Broadcasting Code. The constitutionality of the Nigerian Broadcasting Code, pursuant to which the direct broadcast of foreign news to Nigeria on terrestrial station was prohibited, has been upheld. The court felt that the press should not be free to broadcast to Nigeria foreign media information, that is, information that you get directly from foreign stations and broadcast to Nigeria without some regulation. Then I think there is another statement here that I should bring to your attention. It was in the Newspaper Proprietors Association's case, because there it was argued that the Nigerian Press Council was trying to interfere with press freedom, and this was what the court said. The court said that the right conferred by Section 39, that every person shall be entitled to freedom of expression, can never be absolute in the democratic setup. Otherwise, it will lead to a chaotic society. The practice of various professions must be regulated to ensure order in the society. The general intendment of the Act is to establish standards for the Nigerian press and to deal with complaints emanating from members of the public about the conduct of journalists in their professional capacity, and or complaints emanating from the press about the conduct of persons or organizations towards the press. This is an innocuous intention which does not negate the Constitution nor gag the right to freedom of the press. Part of the reason for the grounds of the press against the Act is the fact that primarily the government and its ministers are responsible for appointing members of the council. The law, just like all the other laws governing professional bodies, is a necessary and justifiable law in a democratic government. The fact that some of the members of the council are appointed by the government does not distract from the intentions of the legislature as clearly stated in the preamble to the Act, which is inter alia to promote high professional standards for the Nigerian press. Well, that may well be so, but if you go deeper into the provisions of the Act, which I have pointed out earlier, you will see that there is a danger in allowing government to have a hand in the discipline of journalists. I think we should have the last slide. So in conclusion, I have said that the press and other agencies of the mass media play a vital role in our democracy. The Constitution itself represents that role when it casts on them the obligation of ensuring the accountability of government to the people. To safeguard this role, which is critical to the success of our democracy, it is necessary to make special provisions for the protection of press freedom, particularly with reference to their sources. And we have a similar provision in Section 189 of the Evidence Act, which protects the sources of police officers and law enforcement agencies when they are investigating a crime. They cannot be compelled to disclose the source of their information. Why not the press, if you can protect policemen and law enforcement agencies? So the courts ought to be more proactive in their decisions in matters relating to press freedom. This is the way I see it, and I leave you to consider what the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive arm have been doing to the media over the years. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you to Mr. Tayo Oyetibo. He's the Chief Counsel and the founding partner of Tayo Oyetibo LP. We'll be passing around a feedback form. Please help us fill it out. We would like to know how we're faring, and we would like to be better at our event. So we're passing around a feedback form right now. So please, we'd like to implore you all to please fill it out for us. So we'll be going to our last session. I'm sure we've been having a good time so far. So we'll be going to our last session now, and that is going to be a panel session. But before I call forward our panelists, I'd like to once again just recognize some of the important, everyone here is very important, but just recognize some people here. The Consul General of the Consulate of Germany in Lagos, His Excellency Mr. Wiert Berner, and the wife of the Consul General of the Consulate of Germany, Dr. Imke Berner, and the representative of the Honorable Minister of Information and National Orientation, is the Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Press Council, Mr. Dili Ezuaga, and the representative of the President of the National Association of Women Journalists, Mrs. Diola Ekine, also Her Excellency, Ms. Jette Bierum, the Consul General of the Consulate of Denmark, and His Excellency the Professor Bobby Monroe, the Consul General of the Consulate of the Republic of South Africa, also Her Excellency Ms. Amanda Roach Brown, the U.S. Consulate Deputy Public Affairs, and Dr. Richard Ikebe, the Chairman of the Board of BusinessDay newspaper, and the Chairman of the Board of Directors of the BD Foundation, Mr. Clement Isong, also the Chairman Advisory Board of the BD Foundation, Mrs. Olajobi Makinwa. And just like I said, everyone here is very important. So please put your hands together for yourself. Thank you so much. Also, I'll be welcoming now for our panel session. We are hitting the home run. And this panel session, on this panel, I'll be welcoming our panelists. Firstly, we'll be welcoming Mr. Frank Aigbogun, the publisher and CEO of BusinessDay Media. As he comes up, please put your hands together. Thank you. Also, Mr. Mausi Shegun, the Executive Director of the Human Rights Watch Africa Division. Please put your hands together as he comes up. Also, Mr. Muyiwa Matuluko, the CEO and publisher of TechPoint Africa. Please put your hands together. Thank you so much. Mr. Adedeji Deji Adekunle, Program Director, Media Development Investment Fund. Also to Mr. Chijioke Uwaegbe, Mr. Chijioke Uwaegbute, Partner, PwC, Tax and Regulatory Services Leader, Nigeria and Africa Oil and Tax Leader as well. Please put your hands together as they come up. And to moderate this panel is our editor at BusinessDay, Mr. Tayo Fagbule. Please put your hands together as they come up. This panel is going to be a very enriching one, just as we've been having so far.
So there's one more person, actually. Deji's online, and Miss Mouse is also online. Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Nwachukwu Egbunuke, also from the Pan-Atlantic University, please step up. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go straight to the point. What I'm going to ask our speakers to do, our panelists to do, is just give us their first thoughts, and I'll follow up with questions if necessary, and hopefully also leave enough time for questions from the audience. So I'll pass the mic. Just your opening thoughts on the topic today, please. Thank you. Oh, there's a mic. All right, please go ahead. Let's start with this. I'm mic'd already.
Okay, calm down. There you go. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's almost afternoon. A lot has been said, and so to speak, on quite a number of issues. First, from the legal aspects, the training of journalists, the viability of the media platforms, and otherwise. But it also brings to fact something that perhaps that still needs to be emphasized, and which is that you cannot get quality journalism without also quality training of journalists. Dr. Kebia has said that, and it needs a lot to be much more emphasized, because the quality of journalism you get is based on the economic implications of those who are working for. I'll give an example. In SMC, I take mostly undergraduate students, and we are having less and less students offering and opting for print or broadcast journalism for obvious reasons. They don't pay much compared to those in PR and advertising. And I think it's something to keep very much in mind, because this is the future, and if the future fellows who are studying communication are not going for these two areas, then a lot needs to be done, and done very fast for that matter.
I think we should go online to Ms. Mausi. Ms. Mausi, your opening remarks, please.
Thank you, moderator. I hope you can all hear me clearly.
Loud and clear.
I want to thank the Business Day Foundation for this invitation, and to apologize, as I have done to them in private, that I cannot be there in person. And moving quickly to my opening comments. I mean, there's very little that can be said beyond what the previous speakers have said. My focus is on the media and human rights. And Mr. Tayo Yetibo, the learned SCN, basically stole my thunder. He said everything that I would have wanted to say, but perhaps a little bit of an emphasis around international law and how much it protects not just journalistic privilege, but the work that journalists do, the role that they play in any society. Now, what underpins this privilege and the role that the media plays is the freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is the right of every individual to hold opinions without interference, and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media, regardless of frontiers. So freedom of speech and freedom of the media are encapsulated in this right. And just, a little bit more on Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which is also basically borrowed from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You would see that much of that content is also what is reflected in our Constitution. Now, what is clear is that this right is one of those that is not absolute. The learned SCN had made that point, but I wanted to emphasize it. Thus, it permits regulation or limitation on the enjoyment of this freedom because of the dangers that that is posed by extreme views, false and fake news. We're all aware of what's happening online and in real life, as well as hate speech. Finally, the true test really is how to ensure high quality journalism and a safe space for civic dialogue without compromising the core elements of freedom of expression, not just in the print, radio, or television media, but as well on social media. And I'll leave it there.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Mausi. I'll have Chijoke make his opening remarks, and then we'll come to Deji. We'll just back and forth like ping pong. Thank you.
And good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Once again, thank you to Business Day for putting this together. I think the conversations have been extremely insightful, and I've personally learned a lot sitting, in the audience and listening. I think for me, I think we need a reality check, as an industry. First and foremost, we're a business, so let's never forget. I mean, we talk about journalism and the rest, but if you look at the industry, they are businesses, and they are not immune from what is happening in the economy, on one hand, and also what is happening globally. Whether we're looking at how the traditional, media revenues are declining, and it's a reality. Traditional. If you look at print media in advanced countries like the US, you probably see, was it a 21% decline last year? And it's the reality of your business, right? And then, I mean, if I think about what the publisher must be going through in looking at how his costs have risen, how economic policies have impacted, cost of doing business, the ability to attract talent. We talk about nobody wants to go to journalism, but really, are you able to pay the talent that you want to attract, right? We talk about, your need to innovate. I love the statement you made, sir, about analog thinking. And the way I think about analog thinking for me is, right, I need to be able to let go of what has worked for years. And to be honest, it's a structure that has worked for years. Print media, I grew up reading newspapers. So yes, it was a profitable business, but now we need to pivot, we need to innovate. And then while we're at it, we also need to start thinking about the gender disparity, again, in the industry itself. And, I saw some data somewhere that the male to female ratio is 4:1. And then when we talk about leadership positions as well, the implications. So there are a lot of things that we need to start thinking as an industry to say, are we really moving with the times? Do we understand the reality of the changes? Are we able to pivot? Are we able to adapt our business models? And even for the journalists themselves, how do you reinvent yourself within the current realities? So, and I'll probably talk a bit more around, the journalists of the future and how you can future-proof yourself. But I'll stop for now.
All right, thank you very much, Ijoke. Deji, how are you? Please, your opening remarks.
Okay, thank you, Chayo. I think I would like to start by saying thank you to Business Day for putting this together. It's been a great learning experience for me. And the breadth and the width of the discussions, from the legal aspect to the context that was set by the keynote speaker, which I would like to thank personally for putting the entire journey of the media in proper context and the good and the bad events that have happened. And it's important we take these things into cognizance when we are planning what we want to do for the future. It shows that we are not static, we are an ecosystem, and that this ecosystem is growing. We need to take stock of the growth and what has happened positively and what has gone well, and start to embrace new behaviors that will take us where we need to be, especially as businesses. It's important to also echo what the last speaker said about us not being immune to the ecosystem that we are in, to the country that we are in, and the economic factors. So we do not exist in a bubble, and many times we want to solve our problems in a bubble. So it's important that we know that we need to talk with other people, other factors and stakeholders in what we do. For example, we're talking about creators. Creators are meeting, there are conferences held, there are discussions about a creator economy, and many times you don't see journalists there as if we're in part of that same economy. And when we hold our own conferences, sometimes it's the same way. I think we need to build more bridges.
We need to have more frank conversations. We need to talk about the responsibility of mass media. And then finally, I would say we need to be pragmatic about the way we experiment around our revenue. We need to, like the keynote speaker said, build our business models around what works, not assuming because something didn't work 10 years ago, it won't work now, but we need to experiment. We can't build a castle around past experience because factors change, time changes, technology catches up or opens new opportunities, and we need to be very, very pragmatic about that and focus on the public interest of the work that we do. So I think that I'll stop there as my opening thoughts. But again, thank you to BusinessDay for putting this together. It's been an interesting discussion so far.
Thank you, Deji. So I'll go on to Muyiwa and then finally publisher.
Hello, everyone. So I came here today hoping to learn more than I shared, and I think I've learned a lot. I'm coming from the new media perspective, and echoing the thoughts of Deji here about bridging the gap, I think is very important to bridge that gap. The media business, like Chijuke said earlier, is facing an existential crisis, right? Deep in revenue, and even the business model is no longer sustainable. And then while we're trying to grapple with that, everyone is affected, whether you're legacy media or you're new media. And then as we're trying to grapple with that, artificial intelligence has come too. And then we're also, trying to catch up. And then I see a lot of resistance in that area, particularly in legacy media. I was at a conference in Kenya, I think last month, and you could see how much resistance, there is to adopting artificial intelligence. And the truth is, AI is here to stay. And there's a common saying they say in the space, which is artificial intelligence would replace you, but the person using artificial intelligence will replace you. Like if I want to recapture that in the concepts, the context of where we are, I could say, the publisher using artificial intelligence will replace you. So we have to start having those conversations about how do we use artificial intelligence to increase capacity, volume, even explore business models, revenue models, and still kind of keep all the ethics of journalism in place, transparency, objectivity, accuracy, and all of that. So I'm hoping that I can share some of those insights. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Muyiwa. Publisher.
Thayo, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Two things keep me awake every night. First is how to get our people to build more relevant content. And the other one is how to ensure that we have people who are sufficiently resourced to monetize that content so we can have the ability to build more relevant content so we can monetize it and then build more relevant content. What I find, I'm not as young as I look, but perhaps the gray on my hair will probably tell the story. I was at a newspaper yesterday celebrating its 40th, and I was one of the staff. So it means that I've been in the business at least for 40 years. What I have found here in my journey, and I've been to a number of newspapers where I worked, is that we have not given enough attention to the need to manage our newspapers better and to ensure that we train our people to be able to build relevant content and to be able to monetize that content in a way that we can build an ecosystem that is effective and is sustainable. Something happened with the outbreak of the first Gulf War. It turned out that when the Gulf War broke, first Gulf War broke, most newspaper newsrooms had already, in America, had already used up their budget. It was the first time that editors and journalists in some of the biggest newspapers in the world began to think about finance. Because when they ask for money, they say, but your budget is finished. And they say, what budget? So since then, we have seen newspaper editors take more interest. But that's not happening in Nigeria. When the Newspaper Publishers Association meet, they are bothered about which government official is going to come and declare it open or who will come to speak. Ditto for when the Guild of Editors meet. They're looking for government officials to speak about security. And it's good to talk about security, but that's the job of the reporters. Let them go and find out what's happening to security. The managers of the media needs to think about the future of the business. And unfortunately, we have a situation today where our business models have been challenged. Problem is that we don't even understand that there is a business model. And because we don't understand that there's a business model, we are not able to effectively interrogate the model to see where it is failing. What I hope to contribute this morning or this afternoon is that our business model is broken. And around the world, newsrooms are beginning to adapt to the changes, refining their business models or creating new ones to ensure sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Publisher. So I think we will start going into personal, concrete things that we're saying or that we're doing, addressing all of these things we've highlighted. Maybe by way of summarizing, I would just say we have an ecosystem that has been threatened. For centuries, it has been able to survive, to sail like a ship, but now it's becoming a dinosaur. And even for those who came in the digital era, there also are threats from AI. So what concretely is being done in each of your areas to address some of the challenges you said? I'll start with, Mike is with you, Publisher. What concrete ways, what is keeping you awake is to find the staff, to write quality, relevant content that can be monetized. But I think there's something tying all of that together, finding the funds that can find the staff who are capable to write that content, who are also capable to monetize that content, and then you have a feedback loop. How are you able to do that, to fund the business, to keep it running, to achieve these three things that keep you awake?
Thank you. In 1993, when I was editor of a newspaper, I attended a program in Cardiff, at the Thompson Foundation in Cardiff, for 10 weeks. And it was a course on the editor as a manager. It was the first time that I was introduced to the concept of the editor being a manager. I recall coming back and writing a 4-page report to my bosses. It was simply dismissed. The question and the debate was, where is the place of a newspaper as a public service organization, and where is the place of the newspaper as a business? The understanding that I came back from Cardiff with was that yes, the newspaper is for public good, but where it cannot sustain itself as a business, it cannot fulfill that public good duty or obligation. And it is what we're seeing in Nigeria today. We're going through a digital revolution that is changing the way our audience relates with our content, and yet we are not able to respond. We are even struggling to see it, and that's because of the weakness of the management that we have on ground. Now, two ways that I believe this has been been reflected in the way that we approach our business at BusinessDay. We see journalism. In fact, myself and we were together at the conference in Kenya. And one thing that struck me in Kenya was that the East African media community is so far advanced than anything we can see in Nigeria or the rest of West Africa, in terms of their understanding of how dynamic the media place is, the changes that are happening, and how quickly they are responding to those changes. I have expressed some of my understanding with people who are training media people in Nigeria, and to say that what I found in Kenya was simply profound in terms of what they are teaching journalists and who they are that are teaching journalists. In Eastern Africa, the academia and the practice of journalism has merged. In Nigeria, it has not. The teachers are still in their silos, teaching what they think is relevant to the media. The media is running in another tangent, failing as often as it fails, hardly impacted by what the teachers are teaching. Now, there is the understanding today that for a media organization to be sustainable, it must have at least 3 to 5 different separate revenue streams. When we began 40 years ago, you had a model built on printing and selling the paper. You print. And then wherever the gap is, you sought to make up with advertising revenues to be complete. Then you were able, if you managed well, to be profitable for your print newspaper, which meant that when you printed, you could recover all the revenues by selling. Today, it is absolutely impossible to recover all your printing revenues by the revenues that accrue from selling the newspaper. There is no way, no way to do it. It's not possible. It cannot be possible, especially in the Nigerian environment, where a ton of newsprint today is about 2 million naira. That ton was sold for 20,000 not too long ago. And so today you have a situation where BusinessDay, I think, has the highest cover price for the newspaper in Nigeria. But it cost us near 600 naira to print one copy. That's not even adding the cost of distribution. By the time you add the cost of distribution, it is not of 600 naira. So how do you survive in that environment? Which is why the recent studies on sustainability suggest that you must have more than 3 or at least 3 revenue streams. So first is to understand, for the journalists or the media, what is a revenue stream? How many revenue streams do we have, and how many more can we have sustainably to be able to pay our staff their salary? Is the minimum you can do. And there is a lot more beyond paying salaries. We talked about training a while ago. Traveling. I found that traveling has become a major cost item for newspapers, unless, of course, you're not ready to build relevant content. In the same week, our editor was in Washington to cover the World Bank meetings. And then suddenly it occurred to us, it would be crazy for him to come back and for us to send another person to go cover the US election. And we then said, okay, is it possible to adjust your travel so you can stay till after the election? By the way, I expected a more interesting election than they had in America. Anyway, and then our staff was in Johannesburg for a training. And then there was a mining roadshow by Nigeria. And we said, yeah, you can't just come back after the training. You need to stay until the mining conference is over. This costs money. You have to spend money to buy a ticket to put someone in the hotel. And that's the minimum you need to do to build relevant content. Nigeria is in a frenzy to attract investment into mining. I think we've absolutely failed as a nation with our oil resources, and we're now hoping we can do it better in mining. But you can't attract people without a good reporting, first of the mining potential that you have, and of the huge market that there is for investment into that sector. So that's a challenge today. Just understanding that the media is a business as well, and must be a business for it to be able to discharge or to deliver its obligation in the way of public good.
All right. So I think some points you've raised, Deji, can also, because Deji, you're sitting across the table from a publisher of a legacy newspaper who needs funds. What are you finding, and how do you select, how do you support, knowing the list of, the litany, the list of problems that they're facing? What are you finding? What are you seeing in funding and helping media publishers?
That's a great question, Tayo. At MDIF, the Media Development Investment Fund, we are an impact investor focused on independent media in places in nations and locations that struggle with press freedom issues. And so almost everywhere we work, it's never an ideal situation. However, we do have a list, we do have guiding principles that determine who we fund, how we fund, and who we work with. So first of all, as an impact investor, the most important thing to us is the impact, which means your vision for independent media must align with ours. It must be evident in your content, it must be evident in your antecedents, in your stances, in your editorial philosophy and policy. So that's the first thing. You must be clearly and evidently a public interest and independent platform. Then we look at the potential of what you're doing, and we can now start discussing the purpose for your raise, the kind of funding you're looking for, because we're a conventional funder. We don't do grants, so we do investment. So are you looking for a loan, or are you looking for patient capital, which we also do? So what we do is we look at your impact, and then we look at the purpose, and we look at the vehicles that we have. We have some higher risk vehicles, and we have some lower risk vehicles, because a loan, no matter what happens, has to be paid back with interest, even though our rates are a lot more favorable than what you will find in conventional banking. But we do not just stop there. We provide, as a staple, continuous technical assistance and advisory for all our clients. So what we're doing is we are providing patient capital and technical advisory.
Yeah.
But the important thing is you must be a viable business. You must be a viable business. We must be able to evaluate how well you are doing in terms of the commerce, your business plan, your revenue framework, and the impact of the work.
Can I come in? Just come briefly. What are the recurring problems that you're seeing, especially in Nigeria? We've said a lot about how this West Africa, Nigeria is different from East Africa and Kenya and what have you. What are the recurring problems in Nigeria that you're seeing, and how are you helping publishers address them, given what you do?
Yes. So we discovered after a while that the people who who could measure up to the criteria that we had weren't that many in the places we work. And so we decided to create special programs like what I lead here in Nigeria called the Nigeria Media Innovation Program. And the idea is to provide support, help people grow, help organizations that are struggling, give them some breathing room to experiment with different resources, whether it be finance, grants, and of course, technical advisory and consulting, to experiment around the work, how they are running the organizations, and how well their operations are run. And we've seen, and this is very important because we've seen a lot of issues in this space. Like we've come from a very adversarial framework where a lot of us in the profession are drawn by the public good of the profession. However, many of our editors did not plan really to run businesses. And so the way we set up our media houses sometimes, we don't take into account the legal frameworks and protections we need to put in place. We don't take into account the revenue burden of the space, the salary, and the economic risks of the countries that we operate. So these are problems that we've seen. And finally, I think this, I'll say this finally because it encapsulates a lot of what I could probably jump into, which is strategic planning. A lot of strategy has to go into running a viable business, especially with our own goals and purposes, because the moment you decide to be a media entrepreneur, you've chosen a path that is not the most easily threaded path. If you are just running for profits, the media house is not the first business you would think about.
Exactly.
However, it can be done well and profitably, but you have to do that strategy.
Okay.
That's all.
So maybe I'll go to Chijioke now, who's basically, you're consulting, you're into strategy, you've done reports on the media landscape. How can you speak to the concerns of both the publisher and DG?
Yeah, and I think, absolutely loved your inputs. And I think in the first instance, the way I started was, first and foremost, we're a business, right? And if you look at it from the perspective of Nigeria, and I'm going to start from Nigeria and the reality of the Nigerian economy. I love the point that you made about strategy, planning, and the rest. But nobody planned for the past 18 months or the past 1 year in Nigeria. The best businesses that we've advised in Nigeria have all struggled with the reality of harsh economic realities of operating in Nigeria. And, we must face that reality and then ask ourselves the first question of, as an industry, what are we even doing to protect ourselves? What are we even doing to, first of all, even engage with the government? They talk about the economic stabilization bill. Many of the different industries have gone to present the reality of their operations and how they must be considered. Why has the media industry not done that? You haven't created an environment where there's significant local substitutes for the inputs into my production process. And yes, I'm producing newspapers, right? Which would be the basis of which I engage with my customers. But, those costs have risen astronomically. And we need to be asking ourselves as an industry, have we even tried to engage to say, what can we do from a stabilization standpoint? Government, let's hold our government accountable, because you want us to report. I like the point you made at the mining industry. How am I going to be able to report the mining industry properly when your policies have even impacted my business to an extent that I can't even run. And that's on the one hand, right? On the other hand, you know, it's hard to say, but I think Deji mentioned it as well, that we are not traditional business people. Like right now, I'm doing some level of consulting for an entertainment fund, and half of the issues we have is the fact that they are thinking more of creativity than business. So they don't have proper business plans or business plans that are nimble enough to be able to take into consideration other revenue sources. And now, if I look at an editor or a publisher in a newspaper or any of the media houses today, have they been able to look at their strategic plan to say, how do we pivot? What will it take to pivot? Do we have the skills and capabilities to pivot? Because it's easy to talk about new media, let's look at digital and the rest, but do you have the skills and capabilities to do that? You need to be able to build up the skills and capabilities, or bring people that can help you do that.
Yeah.
And okay.
No, go ahead.
I guess the last point I wanted to also talk about is that even the publishers and, you know, the people that run these media houses, I guess there are a few skills I kind of wrote down, you know. Apart from, you know, understanding, having the right business skills or hiring the right business skills in this period, you know, multimedia storytelling, data analysis, audience engagement, understanding emerging technologies are critical skills you need to build to be relevant in this new economy. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Chijioke. So I think now I'm going to go to Ms. Mausi and Dr. Egbunike, because I think both of you can address two issues that have popped up. The people, training the staff. You've said your students want to become creators, influencers, PR, rather than be journalists. And you've heard the publishers here, you've heard the funders here, and they're saying, look, where do I find those people with those skills? So is it that there's no connection between the media and the academia about what skills are needed? So that's one question for you. For Ms. Mausi, I would say is, even though they want to be influencers, even though they want to be creators, and that's the reality, but how about the understanding the ethics of their profession and how the, human rights cannot be absolute? I think maybe you can put in that, you can speak to that also when Egbunike is done.
Yeah, okay, so I'll just give a practical example. Before moving to Pan-Atlantic University to teach, I was working as an independent, for independent media organization, multilingual independent media organization, but we are 100% online. And COVID was one of the most interesting and the most, for us as an organization, because that's when we did the greatest amount of job more. And why was that possible? It was possible because we were able to fall back on the skills of many people. During COVID, no one went out. There was a lot of time. And we now started tracking the media ecology of COVID around the world from a perspective of as journalists, and that's just journalism. Why was it also possible to do that? Because that organization which I worked for, there was so much collaboration between industry and also those who are in the academia. And I think it's something that is really, there's so much disjoint, so to speak, within the Nigerian media industry. Because there's nothing that stops, I don't know, for instance, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 years ago, there was a Belt and Road Initiative. What is that? What is the impact of that initiative within Nigeria? No one has that data. No one has been able to do that. And they are looking at now getting, precisely because we don't see that connection, so to speak, between, it's just following the case system, go report, file a report, get the thing done, and so on and so forth. Research and data is a fundamental aspect of journalism. And that's what sells, and to be able to make that. Then coming to your question with why would my students want to be journalists? Nobody wants to be poor.
I agree. I'm a journalist.
I understand.
I understand, but because if we have the people, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Without the journalists, the stories won't be told. AI can't write it. We're going to come to you. AI can't write those stories.
Yes.
For instance, but we need to know what is being done to reverse it, because if there are no people, there's no journalism.
Then it perhaps it's also time to reverse it. Means that we have to be creative enough to be able to attract this type of young people who naturally don't fit into the old modes of doing things.
So newsrooms have to experiment.
They really have to experiment. Is it possible that you just employ someone and the only thing they do is to create content? For BusinessDay, yes, you guys are high think tank, very intellectual, very financially based, but employ a team that the only thing they do is just to create content. And you will see the difference. Perhaps it might not work, but perhaps it might even work you might be really very, very impressed. And that's what is happening across boards with most of these young fellows. They can be able to do 1,000 things at the same time. And with that, there will not be that so much pressure to tag themselves as journalists, but they are doing what they want to do.
All right. Okay. Ms. Mousy, how do we help this new breed of journalists or wannabe influencers, creators also understand that there are ethics to their work, to their writing, and a social media account isn't a check to write whatever you please?
I mean, the space that we occupy, whether as journalists, as human rights advocates, or or activists, if you like, is a contested one.
Yes.
And it behoves on us that we ensure adherence to rules and ethics of the profession, whichever side of the divide we find ourselves. It is the business of exposing what those who are committing abuses or crimes would like to keep covered. And so if you're doing that, there are a number of things that you must do. Basically what I would tell my own team when we go out. One, the truth is your friend. You must stick with the truth. That is the absolute foundation of this work. And that requires you, finding the truth requires you to ensure that there is rigorous fact checking.
Credibility.
You must check your facts, you must check your data, you must check your statistics. You can't go out and spew out rubbish. You will not only be attacked, you can be prosecuted, because as I said earlier, these rights, the freedom of expression is not an absolute right. There are regulations, there are standards, and if you are not telling the truth, you will put yourself in trouble. The truth is not just a weapon, it is your defense. If, for example, you are prosecuted for defamation or for libel, which again, is again another contested one, defamation should not be a crime. But if you are, your key defense is that you are telling the truth.
Yeah.
And how you ensure the truth is by making sure that there is not just rigorous fact checking, there is rigorous editorial process. And I think this is what is lacking with new media. A number of people are lone rangers sitting with their desktop, with their laptop, with their iPad, or their phones in a corner somewhere. No one is editing. No one is checking the facts. No one is applying the rigor that is required. And they then post. It's a click away.
Yeah.
And that click can end in trouble. We have had so many across, it's not just Nigeria, it's not just Africa, across the world. I think as the German German government representative said earlier, it is in the West.
Yeah.
If you are not responsible in the way that you report, you can face the music. There could be legal consequences. And the way that you also ensure that you fact check and you're rigorous about what you do in digging for the truth, it requires you to have security protocols as well. And I think that, again, that's something that's lacking for many groups and individuals. Security protocols that ensure that you can go dig where you need to dig without getting into trouble, or that if you do get into trouble, there's someone watching your back. Again, for the lone rangers, for the content creators, there's no one watching their back. So, if you don't have a team working with you, talk to a consultant. Hire a consultant, pay for these services. They will protect you, they will save your lives, and probably ensure that your platform or your medium, exists for a lot longer than many others who have come and gone just because they didn't invest what was necessary to keep it going and to ensure that the rules of the profession are respected and protected.
Thank you, ma'am. I think it's just to keep us on track. We're thinking about things that we have to do to keep the media independent, resilient, and sustainable. So they're all tied together. And of course, the big elephant in the room now about being independent, being sustainable, or even being relevant is AI. Deep fakes, you can write stories. You said it yourself. The person who will take my job is the person who can use, not necessarily AI, but the editor who knows how to harness AI. What is your experience here or elsewhere that we can learn from about the reality of AI?
Yeah, so I like using analogies when I try to explain AI and why it's here to stay and it has to be embraced. So I'll take an analogy from the Nigerian context. I'm old enough to remember a time when calculators were not allowed in JAMB exam halls. But I hear now that they are allowed to use calculators. And a lot of the resistance against calculators then was because the generation before felt that they did a lot of these calculations in their head. So it seems like laziness that these kids are using calculators, right? But now calculators they're allowed in exam halls, and it doesn't take away the purpose of exams is to understand how much or to learn how much the student has learned. It doesn't take away from that fact, right? Another example is ATMs. We all know the full meaning of ATM, automated teller machine. There was a time when teller means that person at the bank, right? Some of us might remember this ad from the 90s. Maybe I'm aging myself.
My tally number.
My tally number, yeah. Where you had to queue. You can only do transactions from the branch that you opened your bank account, and then online banking came, internet banking came. And those tellers, they were not replaced by the ATMs. They became customer relationship, they became branch managers, they became all the other roles in the banking sector. So if you bring that to the media space, right, AI is a tool. I think most of the dismissive perspective I hear about AI is because of a lack of understanding or willingness to learn how it works. So I'll give you an example. Forbes, we all know Forbes. They have a content management system named Betty that is named after their founder. And it is AI powered. And what it does is over a million articles that Forbes has published over the years is a knowledge base for that AI. And now when a reporter wants to write a story, it helps them develop angles for the story, suggest headline, can even write the first draft for them. And then the human still edits it and has the power to ignore some of the suggestions. And they publish it and they don't have to tell you that.
But wouldn't there be a problem with also attribution? Wouldn't you say this story was written with the help of AI?
So in this case, right, it's arguable that AI was just the tool for writing it because it is using the data, the knowledge base of Forbes, right? And all it's just doing is aiding the reporter to produce content faster.
Okay.
Right, so it could be argued that there's no need to disclose. It could be argued. Another example, and I don't think Forbes discloses, right? But another example of a publication that discloses is Washington Post.
Yeah.
So they have an AI tool called Harrygraph or something, Heliograph, spelled with an F. And they used it during the US elections in 2016. They used it during the Olympics. And what it does is it takes raw data and converts it into very quick live updates, shares it on Twitter, posts it on the website, and they say, oh, this was written by, because it's just very short content,
yes,
not much context. So there's a wide range of applications of AI. For example, at TechPoint Africa, we started experimenting with an AI news writer. So we understand that, you know, I see media is a numbers and execution game, right, at its fundamental level. And sometimes we have a small newsroom, we can't cover all the news stories, right? And there's always this pressure of journalists to keep up with what is going on. And we decided, okay, why don't we use AI to catch up on the news? And then they can then write the deep dives or the insights, you know, following up that news. And so the AI is taught to output the news in the format, in the tone that we have, and then search through our previous content to provide context, and then produces it for the human editor to edit.
Okay.
And then he edits it. And then, of course, we put transparency here that, oh, this was written by an AI tool, right? But that way, we're able to build capacity, we're able to...
Yeah, so, but what I want to know is, are you teaching people, your reporters, to do this in-house, or you can hire graduates back to PAU who are AI ready?
Yeah, I'll be careful about hiring young people who don't have any knowledge of the media, like interns, because...
So training, there's a need for training.
Yeah, you train them, and there still has to be a human editor at the end of it.
Ensures,
yes.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm not going to push, I think, the public questions in the audience, and yes, there we go. So I think there's a roving mic, and we will take from, I think, rounds of 2 per column, and then we'll take, please, and then, wow.
Don't forget this one.
No, so we're taking, so it's how, okay, so we'll, so we'll do it this way. We'll start first batch of questions here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll take another, questions here, and then we'll do that. So the first 4 questions here, please.
From me?
No, 1 question, please.
1 question. Yeah, it's 1 question.
Yes.
Before anybody asks me about a question on my own presentation, I want to quickly ask my own. You know, when the keynote speaker was talking about media, that do we want to practice as a vocation or a business? Now, because I established a radio station, and I want to put the question to him, can you operate a news medium otherwise than as a business? That's my question.
All right, thank you, sir. Please, we'll take the first 4 questions. The lady behind, the 2 ladies, and then the gentleman there. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellency, I'm glad you invited me here. I'm Chief Dr. Anita Nana Okuribido, President of Women in Renewable Energy Association and the first female president of Council for Renewable Energy, Nigeria. So my question would be, how can the issues of media resilience be integrated into understanding the basics of renewable energy through the lens of women, youth, and persons with disabilities, while proactively nosediving into the energy policy framework to ensure sustainability, and of course, vis-a-vis aligning with the activation of the relevant Sustainable Development Goals 5, 7, 13, and of course 17 that we are doing. And I really want to appreciate Dr. Ikebe for his keynote, because he delved into sustainability, into the grassroots level of bridging the information gap. And I think we need to look into that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. So my question is to Deji. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Etemere Glover. I'm the CEO of the Impact Investors Foundation. I'm in the impact investing space, so I know media is very important in telling stories and very credible stories that can lead to transformative and inclusive growth in Nigeria. So my question to Deji, first and foremost, let me commend your organization for, one, being an impact investor and deploying capital to bring transformation in the media space. I'm particularly interested in how you define impact and track impact. What kind of matrices do you use? And what kinds of changes have occurred as a result of your investment in media houses that you've funded so far? And my second question is, how do you also help other investors to deploy capital in the media space? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Last question, then we'll go to the panel.
I'm not quite sure if mine's a question or a statement. When Henry Ford put the car on the road, he wasn't allowed to just put it. There had to be a man walking in front of him with a red flag. And that was because the car was seen to be dangerous. And at that time, it was horse and cart. And you can imagine what the streets of London must have looked like, with lots of horses leaving their trail behind. None of those people exist today. All of those jobs do not exist. You do not put a red man in front of you when you want to go on the motorway. You just buy a car and you start using it. Jobs evolve. The question is, how do your jobs evolve? Why would anybody want to read a newspaper or newsprint? I mean, what's the essence? The average age of, the median age in Nigeria is 19. You double that, that's 38. Look around the room. Where are the 38-year-olds? Right? Yeah, I know, I knew you and your boss. But the median age is 19. Who are your audience? Who's your demographic? You're talking about a business. Who's paying and why? And the thing that you also need to understand is that it looks like journalism is a worldwide business and it works the same way everywhere. It doesn't. Journalism is local. In the 80s, I used to go to Toronto quite a lot. And one of my business partners used to ask me, Ade, what's new in London? And one day I told him that, we're giving away free newspapers at the Underground. And the next time I came back, he wanted to do that business because that business wasn't in Toronto at the time. Meanwhile, it had been in London for years. We had a magazine in London called Loot, where it was free advertising. It folded up in 2015 because the internet ate its lunch. Now in Nigeria, sorry, let me put it another way. If you live in a first world country, any of the first 20 first world countries, if you cannot walk for more than a mile without coming across a shop that will be having adverts in the window about what's going on locally. And then you'll have local newspaper, and then you'll have local radio, and then you'll have local whatever scaling up. In other words, the people in that particular environment have distribution channels to get their stuff out. Where's that in Ajegunle? Where's that in Surulere? Where's that in Ikoyi? Where's that in Banana? It doesn't exist. That, however, is a business opportunity. As to Richard said, going local in Nigeria makes a lot of sense. It may not make a lot of sense elsewhere. So your markets are very, very local. Because what's happening in Kenya is not what is happening in Lagos and never will be. They were colonized, they will do this. We traded. Our history is different, our culture is different, and the way that you move forward is to localize your business. And I don't see the disruption going on in the newspaper business as because it used to be, because it's not now newspaper anymore, it's now news media. And as I said, you're talking about all these young people. They don't have this and they don't have that. So where are the courses? Where are the courses that you're putting forward for them to come forward to learn? Or is it self-help that they're supposed to be doing? You're criticizing people that don't have a mechanism to learn what you believe are ethics. Oh, and by the way, Ethics is a sliding scale. What we thought were ethics and morals 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 70 years ago, they've all changed. They've completely changed. Even if it's just Roe versus Wade, which everybody in America knows, that's changed. Everything changes. It's a sliding scale. And if you don't adapt, if you don't do the disruption yourself, somebody's going to come along and do it for you.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. So we have 3 questions, really. Can you run, Dr. Kebe, can you run a radio station without running it as a business? We have one about how you can report renewable energy sustainably, keeping in mind women and youth. And then we have really a third comment for Deji about how MDIF invests for impact. So, Dr. Kebe, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. SAN, is it a vocation or a business? I did say in passing when I was making that comment that it can be both. You can have a cause, a mission, and you can actually make money from your mission. And how do you do that? One word, relevance. A lot of people are looking for information on law, about the system. Now, how do I create programs? How do I create situation in which that audience, I talked about communities, that is willing to pay for what I have to offer. So, and I have to make it relevant to them. Drucker has 5 questions. There's a lot of information on Drucker's 5 questions. And when Drucker was asking his 5 questions, he was much more involved in the NGO sphere. Most of his later life he spent working with charities. And one of those questions, maybe 2 or 3 of those questions is, what's your business? What are you doing? What are you trying to do? Who are your customers? What do your customers want? And if you can answer Drucker's 5 questions sincerely, you will find a nexus, you will find a point at which you can tap money from it, because it will send people your way. There is no media business that cannot make money in Nigeria. It will be difficult at first, but if you become relevant, if you make yourself relevant and you are producing the information which your community wants, needs, they will be ready to pay for it.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And by the way, Frank was talking about leadership at some point. One of the most successful media managers in our generation was Alhaji Babatunde Jose. And what did he do right? You may say, oh, that was in the 60s and 70s, but there must be some principles that we can learn from him. There must be some principles we can learn from him. And what are we doing wrongly? And what are the assumptions that we have made about the profession? We think we are on a mission, and we think we are on a war path. And that mentality of a war path is something we picked up from attacking the British colonial government people. And we haven't let it go. We are almost always fighting someone. You listen to us on radio and on television. We're basically attacking, and most of the time not producing any result or solutions.
All right, sir.
And I think that paradigm needs to change.
All right. Deji, quickly, please.
Okay. Thank you for the kind comments on the work we do. How do we track impact? So we look at impact on two levels. We are a very, very client-centric organization. So our focus is actually the sustainability of our clients and how well they're doing. So we track impact from the growth in the audiences, stability, the audience of our clients, the stability of our clients, and how well they are doing as businesses and their revenue, while they are the ones who put in the work. We are not the ones who are going out there into the field every day doing the stories that matter. The people we work with are, and we are under no illusions about that. So we encourage them, we support them every day, and we look at their impact as the real impact. But what we track is we track the growth of our clients and the people who are beneficiaries of our programs while they influence the space. Remember, if they were not doing some solid work, they would not even be our clients to begin with.
Okay. All right.
So you must show that. And then finally, how we help other investors in the space is we are one of the very few voices internationally. We are part of the Global Forum for Media Development. Everywhere our fundraisers go, we are out there constantly going into the rooms with that matter, trying to make a case for the importance of independent media. If you look at the global funding landscape, even when it comes to grant funding, there is just so little support for media to exist as media, outside support for media to do something for some interest group or the other. And that's the message we carry everywhere we go. So that's what we do. But we are trying to ready the media, build the ecosystem so media entrepreneurs can seek funding from not just us. I mean, we have a very limited budget, but actually other players in the impact and in the financial landscape as well.
All right, thank you. So we'll just take last round of questions and we're done. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's start 1, 2, 3, and then we'll take another 3 here quickly. So please, your name, your point, please.
Thank you very much, and let me join others to commend Business Day. My name is Abigail Ugweze-Ndisika. I'm a professor of mass communication. I wasn't invited to this program. My vice chancellor was invited, so I came to represent my vice chancellor, Professor Folashade Ogunshola, OON FAS. She sends her greetings and congratulatory message. However, what I want to say is my own position, not the position of the Vice Chancellor. I've listened to all the speakers patiently. I have been in this sphere both as a practitioner and as a scholar. So I'm a scholar practitioner, and I would like all of us to rethink some of the assumptions around the positions of some of the speakers. For us to say that our training, it's not functional, I think we should rethink it. There's always room for improvement, but I can say that we're doing well. And if our training is not functional, I think the industry has a blame in it, because we also send our students on internship, so that what we don't give to them in the classroom, you give to them. So when they come, don't send them to buy food or make tea, train them. Then, yes, also to say that we're working in silos, I think that there is already a shift in that, and I want Business Day to come on board. There's an association known as Communication Scholars and Practitioners of Nigeria. In fact, CJID will be training scholars and practitioners on AI, in a few weeks from now in Abuja, so we can work together. And in terms of looking at the curriculum, the people raise things about audience engagement, content quality, legal reforms, collaboration, tech adoption, digital content distribution, and storytelling. They are all embedded in the curriculum that we use, and we all co-created that curriculum, industry and scholars alike. Then looking at the issue of the history of mass media, sir, the keynote speaker, great great keynotes. But I think that from my experience, both as a student and as a trainer, I've been training for about 24 years, training for the university. I've spent 24 years as a scholar, not as a student. What is missing? The missing link is the experiences of journalists. But the history of the mass media, as you've presented, I think we have materials on that, and I think that should form the thought of you and my big uncle, Dr. Iwere, to look at your experiences, because you don't learn experiences from anywhere. Yeah. But when you look at the history, the works of Duile, the works of Uche on mass media, people and politics in Nigeria, they all help us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ma.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ogie Eboigbe. My first profession was journalism before I went to do something else. But at over 70, I think I'm back to journalism in retirement. Mr. Yotibo, and maybe Mr. Arukundade, every year we celebrate Press Freedom Day. And the governors, the president will tell you, oh, we'll give you press freedom, you have press freedom, we have press freedom. And even all journalists will say, oh, the press, we are free, we can't disclose our sources, we can't do this. But from what you presented, we are living a fool's paradise. There's no press freedom in Nigeria, it's not documented anywhere. Who is going to bear the cut? Because somehow, from the judgments that were even given, some of them, like the judiciary is also hostile. Not just the lawmakers, the governments themselves. If the law is not documented, the law on freedom of the press, then from some of the rules you place there, practically all of us are criminals. So it's a crime to perform this, to perform that, to perform that, but nobody is actually following up to take us to jail. So how do we ensure that even those of us who practice, including lawyers, because we have many lawyers who are writers, who are journalists, who work in media organizations, plus you, sir, because you now run a media house. How do we ensure that we really have the freedom of the press that we are trumpeting every year? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Very good afternoon, and huge thanks to the BusinessDay Foundation for this excellent session. My name is Femi Ojumu. I'm a lawyer and founder of Bailey Myers LP Legal Practitioners, and I'm an author. I've just written a book on national development. Charles Darwin said in 1851 in The Origin of Species that adaptability is the key to survival. Material point. Okay, it is as relevant as it was in 1859 as it is today in an age of AI and other things. So I'll make 3 points. The first point is about policy reform, okay, in terms of the disconnect between particular statutes, for example, Section 22, Section 39(1) of the Constitution, things like the 2011 Freedom of Information Act, the Press Council Act. There's a disconnect there, and the likes of the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria can take a lead in effecting policy change, talking and actively engaging the executive and the legislature. It is critical. There is no time to lose, and it must happen straight away. Second point is about funding models. We've talked a lot about this. We've heard a lot. Excellent insights from Dr. Ikibe and the panelists, okay? The likes of The Guardian in the UK, one of the foremost papers there, their funding model had to change. Now they're crowdsourcing for funds. So we need to think seriously about that. Circulation is dwindling and will continue to dwindle. So there is a case for segmenting the market. Yes, the median age, as Ade said, is 19, but we have people today who will still buy newspapers, irrespective of the price, because they want to see the content. They don't do your media stuff, but some of the younger people do. Actually, no, the majority of the younger people do. So we need to think seriously about segmenting the market and the offering for that. The third and final point relates to the security of journalists, okay? 69.4% of journalists are being attacked by state operatives. That is unsustainable. It is a crime and cannot be sustained. So the obligation is on NPAN and the Guild of Editors to act and to act now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so last round of questions or comments, and then we will take final closing. Yes, please start from the back. We will come forward, madam. Sorry. Okay.
My name is Anthony Asai Brown. I work for Bloomberg. My question is, if journalism is a public good, is there a case for public funds or some sort of funding for journalism? Unless we don't think it's a public good.
Thank you. The madam here. Very good.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Waire Ofigo. I am the General Manager of Women Radio Lagos. I wasn't invited, but I'm here representing the CEO who sent her regards. So very quickly, my question is for Muyiwa. In adopting AI, how would you address security concerns or technical vulnerabilities, data breaches in AI-generated content? Thank you.
All right, so final question here.
Good afternoon. Mine is a comment on the suggestion. My name is Isaac Ogugwezechukwu, School of Media and Communication. Just to tell media businessmen to prioritize training. If you don't train your journalists, they can't expect much from them. Yeah. What we see in the school is disappointing. And like I told them during the interview, in the industry, it's like you want to plan your family dinner based on another person's kitchen. You want all the industry players, all that trade practitioners to come and train for you, and then they carry the journalists and then put in your workshop, in your newsroom. It doesn't work like that all the time. Have a very structured way of making your journalists go through training. There are a few media houses that do this and they stand out. BusinessDay is one of them. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Noah Deroju. I work with Media Career Development Network, and I'm here representing my boss, Mr. Aliko Otufodre. So the question I have here is actually about when Dr. Ikebe was talking, there's a talk about analog thinking and digital thinking, and the space of capacity building for those who really understand the principles and ethics of journalism. The situation is that there are a lot of people practicing journalism with the capacity to use new media technologies and AI and stuff like that to work in the digital era very well. But a lot of them do not appreciate the principles and core ethics of journalism. Whereas we have a set of people that have been in journalism for years, that have built appreciation for the principles and ethics of journalism, but they don't have the capacity to work in the digital space very well. So now we have media leaders here, we have media trainers here, we have people in the academy. My question is, how exactly do we bridge the gap that has been exposed in that situation? We want to make everybody digital compliant and ethical compliant, in the sense that those that have been there who do not have digital skills, how do we train them and bring them on board? And those that have digital skills who do not have the ethical responsibility, how do we bring them on board? Thank you.
Thank you. We will keep going on and on at this rate. So I think we should, one final, she will close it, please.
Thank you very much indeed. My name is Olajobi Makinwa. Actually, I didn't have any question, but I've been hearing the issue of people don't, they're not embracing AI here. And I'm actually surprised that in Nigeria, we're not embracing it now. It's scandalous, So in that case, since I'm hearing that, why don't maybe BusinessDay organize a training for people on the importance of AI, the governance of AI? I mean, everywhere, this is what is happening. We're going to be left behind. So I'm surprised, honestly. I am bewildered. I don't know what to say. We cannot. We are being left behind, and we shouldn't be left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma, for that. So I think we will just take the closing remarks from the panelists. If you're going to respond to some of the questions, fine. But please brief and to the point. You're holding the mic. Why don't you pass the mic? Unless Miss Mausi starts. Yes, please. Miss Mausi, you go ahead first.
Sorry, my microphone was refusing to get on click.
All right, go ahead.
I mean, I don't know which of the questions would be relevant to some of the things that I talked about, but perhaps I'll
Those are
talk
closing
about
comments,
the
ma'am. Not necessarily addressing any of the questions.
Yeah, just around one, security. Two, I'll talk about who is telling the story and how we should ensure multiplicity and a plurality of voices in our reporting. And just on that point of security. It is an investment. It is an investment establishing security protocols. As someone mentioned in, I think it was a comment or perhaps it was a question, just the sheer number of journalists who get arrested every day. Some, it's not even an arrest, it's an abduction. And what we will call in law an enforced disappearance, because they are disappeared until months later or even or weeks later they show up in the police cell or the DSS cell, or they show up in court. But the houses have the responsibility to ensure that the protocol in place for the sequence of actions to mitigate, whether it's an arrest, it's an attack on the establishment, on the media house. When you're sending individual reporters out to the field, there needs to be a protocol in place to ensure the security of your staff, but also the security of your platform. So online digital security is also an investment that needs to be made. And then just quickly going back to that point about the plurality of voices. I mean, again, the sole woman on a what I would call a manual. It's mostly a panel of men, and it's it's almost everywhere. Whose voices are we reflecting in our reporting? Who is speaking and on whose behalf? If we're going to report issues about women, about children, about the youth, we need to ensure that those actors are participating. You cannot speak about women without women being in the room, being at the table, not just being in the room, being at the table and having a voice. You cannot speak about the youth without having them in the room. We cannot continue to dismiss the youth as not having enough, whether in terms of training or exposure or experience, without giving them the chance and the opportunity to learn from us, to get that experience, the experiences they need from our own media houses, or being mentored. Mentoring is key. Being mentored by well-established veteran journalists, reporters, taking them under their wings and providing them with that kind of exposure. Finally, there was a question about whether the media is a public good and whether it should be funded by government. Listen, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. If you are paid by government, government will have every right not just to regulate but to censor, and you don't want to hand that power over to a state that is already overly powerful. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Ma. Deji, closing remarks, please.
I'd like to say again, thank you to everyone for being here and to my fellow panelists for sharing so much insight. I would start by saying, in addition to the last question I answered, that our website, if you go to mdif.org, you'll see an annual impact report. You see a report of all the people we fund and work with. But the impact report will answer that question quite well. Then I want to also contribute to the discussion around, to two discussions. First, around the digital shift and digital and analog thinking. One of the clear frameworks for thinking that show that we are beginning to embrace the digital space is understanding that our media, the content we create as media entrepreneurs in our journalism should be viewed through a product management framework. So they are now products. They are no longer just, we're not just writing. So your website is a product, your podcast is a product, your radio show is a product, and they are thinking frameworks that help us to interrogate these products, to interrogate the revenue, the viability, the audience, And a lot of the ideas that come with working in the digital space are embedded in that kind of thinking. So we need to adopt a product thinking mindset to deal with what we are facing right now. The second is, we've not spoken enough about it, is the crisis of trust that we also face in the media space. And I think it's important that we address where it's coming from, our parts in it. So first, making sure that our ethical behaviors are top tier. Second, collaborating with other people in the space who also kind of becloud the judgment of the public about the work that some of us do or some of us do not do. And then transparency in that. The transparency is that right now we live in the world, and right from time, it's just normal human behavior that people trust people more than institutions.
Yeah.
And that is why we talk about influencers and content creators going viral. It's because all the responsibility is on their head. They could be picked up tomorrow, they could be sued tomorrow, but they are more natural in the way they engage with their audience. Their flaws are out there. We always try to appear so prim and proper. We need to humanize ourselves a little bit more. We need to show our struggles. We need to show our victories and the path to those victories, whether they be legal, whether they be press freedom victories, or so that when we have press freedom struggles and we want the public to join us in our fight, they feel like a part of what we are doing, not just people who are being talked down to.
All right.
Then the final point I'll make, also in line with transparency, is because we do want to talk to policymakers and we want to make sure that sometimes we find ourselves pandering to the elite audiences, and as what some of my other colleagues would bluntly call power. Perhaps if we pander to the public well enough and gather the audience interest well enough, the elite interest will still read us, will still listen to us, and will still achieve what we're trying to achieve. So I'll leave with that.
Thank you
At the
very
end
much.
of the day, the public interest seems to be the solution.
All right, thank you. Dr. Igbenuke.
Okay.
Cut it short, straight to the point.
Yeah, just two things. The first and foremost is that creative disruption is something we have to not just be open to, but actually not just be open, initiate, especially within the media space. There's no running away from it. And that creative disruption comes a lot by interaction and dependence upon the young people. Actually, to the type of question that he asked, you cannot dislodge the analog thinking by just thinking that, okay, we need a few things and that's where it ends. No, there has to be a confrontation, not confrontation, but between yourself, a generation, and another generation. And it's when that fusion happens that the merits or experiences and the creativity, they iron out. Otherwise, we can talk about every other thing, but still remain entrenched in our old ways, hoping that hopefully that things will change. And then secondly is, yes, there are most of these things I fully understand, but a not much more embrace between industry and the academia. And nothing really stops us from having editors in residence as teachers coming in and just to nurture students with the experience, and the reverse as well for our academics to also go for internship in the industry to help us a lot.
Wow, that's disruptive. Thank you. TJK.
Yeah, I feel like I'm always talking about business, but that's my focus really, because you need to have a business to be able to do all the great things you've talked about. And I think in the first instance, I will reiterate that we need to survive this period. And for us to survive this period, we need to take another hard look at our business model, whether in terms of looking for innovative ways to manage our costs and build our revenues. Globally, a lot of layoffs are happening. I can't remember, there's a CGID, we're doing a study for them, And I can't remember the number in thousands of job losses in the media space. And it's the reality. But I don't think that that's the first thing we need to do to start laying off people. No, let's be a bit more innovative around how we're looking at our business model. I know someone talked about funding, funding for public good. Mine is more of, if there's something the government is doing for other industries in terms of policies to help to stabilize, we need to be able to, as an industry, take advantage of it. I don't know if we are, but I think we should be having that conversation to ensure that there's policies that would help us stabilize in this period, whether it's even import tariffs or things around maybe tax holidays, things that could just help us stabilize from a government standpoint. And then the last point is really, we keep talking innovation. Your management, your leadership must become better business people. They must be able to anticipate what is happening. They must be able to change their business model to look at, I love the point you made about different revenue sources. Have a plan for those revenue sources and how you're able to start, scaling them up. You won't get it today. You're not going to be able to compete with a lot of the, media houses, but it's a scaled up process. So again, just be able to get your business ready for those changes and available for financing as well. I will not advise any of our clients to come and put money in a media business if there's no clarity around the capacity of the leadership, flexibility of the leadership, their business planning, and obviously their ability to pivot and scale. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chijoke. Muyiwa, parting shots.
Okay, yeah. So I just want to say, I think it's very important to have more conversations like this. The gentleman there was talking about, bridging the gap between different generations. I think we should be more intentional about that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we're having enough conversations around the threats of AI and how we can harness it. It's a wave that is going on its own, and if you're not, you can be left out. There will always be ethical considerations and intellectual property considerations. But if we don't have those conversations, we don't understand. So we see what's happening in the West, where the likes of the New Yorker have signed a deal with OpenAI to license their content. Kind of maybe addressing the question about we can talk better about it later. But licensing their content. Also, Africa is missing in that race of creating our own
content,
our own generative AI, our own LLMs, right? So you have cases of bias and all those things that are happening there. I'm aware CJID and a few people are working. Yeah, I'm aware of some, but we don't necessarily even have a national sense of that, right? And so questions of data breaches, protection, they will always come up, security and all of that. So we need to have more of these conversations as media. We need to find a way to bridge the gap, between different generations, because the fundamentals of media are will always be there, they're important, but we also have to find a way to also make sure that we are moving with the times.
All right, thank you. Publisher?
Thanks, Muyiwa. I think for me, we need to think about how to better capitalize media organizations. We need to put more capital at the disposal so we can clear this very negative perception as the media being a place where workers do not get their salaries. We have to deal with it. And better capitalizing the media can involve media organizations independently looking for new shareholders, or it can lead to mergers so that we can be more efficient. We're seeing cost structure in the media, especially in newspapers, changing, and management must quickly recognize that change and adapt to that change very, very quickly. There is also the need to build better content, be more relevant, BusinessDay has, I think, about the youngest newsroom among the bigger newspapers today, and it is deliberate. We want people who are younger to come in so that we can better report for their generation, but most importantly, have people who are tech savvy and be able to do things. Did you make the point? We need to focus on product development as a critical tool in the newsroom today. There's no reason why people who sell detergent will focus more on product development more than we do in the media. We need to focus more on audience engagement. We need to know who our audiences are, how better to reach them, and how better to monetize our engagement with them. I think we also need better training, and all of this can only flow from better or higher capitalization. I think we need to build partnerships. Coming into the media, you would have 7, 8, or 9 pickups, 1 quarter full, driving from Lagos at about midnight, heading to Benin and Onitsha. It was crazy. I think that's where the crisis in the media started, when you could have enabled a transport company to be set up and you can use only one vehicle to do all of that. We have replicated that madness in printing presses. Abroad, newspapers don't own their printing presses. Some have shares in a printing company, but they all take printing services from a printing company. We're in an era today where many of the newspapers, especially the old ones, have 4 or 5 printing locations in Lagos that are printing only 5–10% of their capacity today, and that has led to massive bank loan that is sinking the newspapers today. It's crazy. And I think the final thing is about partnership. We are not ready yet, but BusinessDay and TechPoint are working on a partnership. And we are very excited about it. And you will get to know it's a partnership in the area of technology, and you'll get to know when it is time to announce that. I must, before I finish, acknowledge the help and support that we have received so far from Deji and his colleagues at MDIF. Fantastic. On Monday and Tuesday, 2 of our staff, our finance manager and our head of HR, were training in Abuja. And yesterday evening when they came back, I was asking, okay, what was this training about? And they started talking to me about corporate governance, about how to deal with the board and how to build better HR. And I was very, very excited. So Deji, not like is it a lizard that doesn't get acclaim? I am acclaiming the relationship that we have had with MDIF. Thank you very much. I hope we can get some more local impact investors into the media space. I would rather that's where we're headed and not asking for public funds or government money to fund the media in Nigeria. Thank you very much. And finally, Madam asked a question about renewable energy, about women and all of that. You know what occurred to me when you were speaking? I have had association with renewable personally for the last 10, 12 years. What strikes me the most is that 80–90% of my peers, very well educated and exposed people, do not even know what renewable energy can do. It's such a shame, and I think we should take the blame in the media. For more than 10 years, I've had an inverter that carries my air conditioner. And so you meet very well educated people. In fact, there's one of my friends, a PhD in one of these mining thing from Imperial College and Cambridge, and he doesn't know that an inverter can carry air conditioner. And I think it is The media is failing. We are failing woefully, not just the women, but we're failing everybody in reporting. When would you ever need such reporting if not now?
Yeah.
Given the daily collapse of the grid that we have and the so-called A-band that has turned cost even in public grid power supply to become one of the most expensive in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I guess we're done. Sure. Yes. Yes. And I think you should close, sir.
I wanted to say that freedom is not given, freedom is taken. The Nigerian journalists, at a point, we used to be more activists. Tony Momo was an activist journalist. He wanted to test cases in court because he was a lawyer as well. The media houses, because they've gotten into bed too many times with government, they can't do what they should do that can help the profession move forward. Freedom is not given, it is taken. We have not done enough of testing the waters. Even when cases are glaring, we are not sure what will happen to us the next day, and so we don't do that. I believe that journalists can, if they make the right noises, because we are the one to create the ecosystem that allows us to do the kind of things that we should do. Journalism and public good, and getting public fund is possible. But I mean, the BBC is funded, and this by law. Yes, by law. It has to be by law, but you have to make a case for it. You have to make a case for it. We are not making a case for anything. Yes, we would rather take the money from under the table. We can make a case to get us funded by law because we are doing it for public good. VON, Voice of Nigeria, the aspects of broadcasting that should be serving the people are no longer there. Even the community broadcasting, it's been killed over and over again, because somebody is afraid that there will be an uprising because of public community broadcasting. The kind of broadcasting that should be serving Ajegunle or Surulere or somewhere, we are not doing it. So I'm saying that there's a lot that we can do, but the media have to make a case, and we're not doing that.
Yes, he wanted an answer to his question. I think that's just
okay.
Very briefly. You were asking how the media could ensure freedom of the press, if I understand you correctly. And my suggestion is that if you go to the National Assembly, you have the executive bills and you have the private member bills. The MPN can put together a draft bill. And I believe there are media practitioners in the National Assembly. Take it to them, tell them to introduce these bills, and you can do lobbying in the National Assembly, and you get the Nigerian Press Council Act amended. Simple. All you need to do is to take other professions. If the legal profession can be self-regulate itself, if other medical profession can self-regulate, why not the media? So you put up a very beautiful argument, and I think you can win the case.
Thank you. All right. So we'll close with the picture. We'll have the chairman and chairwoman of BD Foundation to join the panelists, please. Done. Elizabeth. That's it. So after the pictures, we say thank you for your patience and your contributions, and do have a productive day and safe return to your respective places. Thank you all. Yes, you can start.